Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Okay, well, this is The Late Show. Harry Cole is ill and Asher Gould is on holiday in Eastbourne. I'll tell you what, I absolutely don't get these holidays that he goes on. I think his brother owns a flat in Eastbourne. He goes on his own and spends a week just sitting on his own in a flat in Eastbourne. Nonetheless, Asher's a hard-working guy, so we don't begrudge him his bit of a holiday. Now I'm going to tell you the week that I've had. So, as you know, I've largely given up drinking. I don't drink as much as I used to, and I'm feeling good for it. Anyway, a couple of years ago, I bought a cocktail machine, which lies pretty much dormant and empty. My dad came to visit me on Sunday night, and he went, "Oh, Andre, you've got a cocktail machine. How does it work?" And the week descended from there. I feel absolutely dreadful. But you know what? I'm really, really pleased to be here. And you know what we're going to do? Because we've got an extra hour for this show. We're going to talk to George Madrick. We're going to talk to Pete Barnes. But I just want to, take stock for a little bit of all of the big issues that have taken place. The BBC is in crisis. Donald Trump is attempting to sue them. Shamima Begum might be coming back to the United Kingdom. We've also got this issue with police and crime commissioners being abolished. I don't really know where I fall on that particular issue, because I think it is a good idea to have an election that's related to policing. I also think that policing has gone pretty badly wrong in Britain, but the police and crime commissioners kind of aren't the problem and probably make things a little bit better. Also, we've got all of these announcements coming out from Nigel Farage, and I think it's important to bear in mind that Nigel Farage has completely altered his approach to politics. In the past, he was, the bit of a renegade. He's an outsider, somebody who wanted to stir the pot. Now he is looking at a serious programme for government. Do we support it? Do you agree with what he was saying, I think a few days ago, that now he is in favour of nationalisation? The reason is because there are certain strategic businesses, things like British Steel, that if they cease to exist, then that would be a major problem for this country. So he says maybe privatisation has gone too far. I would have strongly disagreed with him maybe 10 years ago, but I do think the idea of turning off the steel furnaces is incredibly dangerous and was something that China probably did for strategic reasons. So, as I say, 0344 499 1000, you can call and talk about any of the issues that have been in the news this week. And we've got now George Madrick, who is the Reform UK leader on Portsmouth City Council. George, how are you?
I'm all right, mate. How are you?
I'm feeling good. I miss Asher. It pains me to say that, but I do miss him. So what do you think about this whole BBC and Donald Trump thing?
I mean, I'm not sure why he's gone to Eastbourne. We really need to address that first. But what a strange choice for a week off sitting in a flat in Eastbourne. But each to their own. But yeah, the BBC and Donald Trump thing. Listen, they got it seriously wrong, right? And this is not the first time BBC have got it seriously wrong. And Donald Trump has got a real track record of holding people for libelous and defamation, and a successful record, may we add, of getting people. He has sued multiple media organisations and been paid off multiple amounts of time. And I think that the BBC should be held accountable for this. It's unacceptable. It's completely unacceptable. They completely changed the tone of the speech, and they completely and utterly... Well, they didn't show it in context, did they? That's the main thing. They didn't show him in context. They made him paint a picture about Donald Trump that wasn't a reflection of the speech that he gave. And for that, it's unacceptable.
Yeah, I mean, the other point to make is that the disruption on the Capitol cut short a debate as to whether to certify the presidential election. So in reality, that challenge to the result should have been allowed to continue, and it would have been in Donald Trump's best interest for there not to have been the incursion into the Capitol. Yet, I watch people like Owen Jones. They are absolutely convinced that he attempted a coup d'etat. In fact, I've also seen suggestion that him building this Trump ballroom is somehow evidence he's not going to leave office at the end of his term. It's madness.
Yeah, it's utter madness, and I'm hearing lots of speculation, especially on radio. I'm an avid listener, and I spend a lot of my time listening to radio. And over the last week, I've heard multiple people, from America mainly, commentators saying about the same thing, that Donald Trump is going to try and figure out a way of staying in office. But their constitution is pretty strict, and I can't see any possible way of that being done. But the people just try and peddle these stories about him, these negative stories where they make him appear like an authoritarian dictator. And I think over the last couple of years we've seen that actually he's not what he's presented as. No. And actually he's a man of peace. He's tried to stop wars, he's trying to do the right things, and people might not like him. Look, some of the things he says are unpalatable, but that doesn't mean he's not good at the job.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll tell you what, I used to defend Donald Trump on the BBC and Sky News, and actually it was remarkably easy. All you ever did was ignored his bluster and watched the White House press briefing, because what he'd do is he would stir the pot and then send in some fairly sensible negotiators, and he'd get an awful lot done. And so the Sky and the BBC, and not necessarily being critical of them, thought it would be really very hard to defend him. Actually, it's not.
No, it's not. But I think people forget that in politics, it's all about the headlines. I mean, politicians have to get headlines. If you want to be the president or the prime minister, you have to control, to an extent, getting those media headlines. And the one thing we can all agree on is, regardless whether you like him or hate him, Donald Trump knows how to get a headline. But as you say, behind that bluster, there is real substance. There's real experience, real substance, and real results. That's the thing as well. He gets real results.
I think the other point to make, that we as Brits find it incredibly difficult, because the United States of America is pretty much the only democratic nation on earth that combines the job of head of state and head of government. So Donald Trump is both, if you like, the king and the prime minister, to use the British example. And that makes it incredibly difficult, because what happens is, on the one hand, he's attempting to project that status as head of state. On the other hand, he has to be in the rough and tumble of politics. And so, if you go to Germany, if you go to Ireland, if you go to most countries, you have those two roles separated out, and it does make things significantly easier.
It does, but I think the thing I like about the American system is the ability for him to do an executive order, and I think that certainly has its negatives. Don't get me wrong, and I'm sure we could sit here and criticise a number of executive orders which are bad. However, I think the ability to bypass the chambers or the Congress, or in our method it would be the House of Lords, etc. I think is not always a bad thing, and I think this is something that we're going to come up against if we do see a reform government in 2029, because the House of Lords is packed of people that are not reform, and no matter what Nigel Farage tries to do as leader of this country, House of Lords will try and hold that up, and it's going to be a real big problem in this country, and people need to realise that it's not going to be as easy on day one as people imagine.
I know that Dr. David Starkey is, by the way, I just want to say, before I make this comment, I'm not saying this is what Nigel Farage is going to do. I know this is what David Starkey suggested he should do. He should go into the King after the general election, and the King says, Mr. Farage, I'd like to invite you to form a government. And Farage should say, I'm afraid I can't, because whilst I have a majority in the House of Commons, I don't have a majority in the House of Lords. You're going to need to appoint X hundreds of members of the House of Lords. And the reason that Starkey says he's going to need to do that is because what will happen is, when Parliament starts, HOLAC will hold up, the House of Lords Appointment Commission will hold up all of Nigel Farage's appointments, and basically we'll be 2 or 3 years in by the time that mess is sorted. And I think most people now realise that what Donald Trump did in his second term as president, having everything written in advance, is what either Nigel Farage or a Conservative government would have to do.
Yeah, I think so. The 2 points you make there are correct. I think number one, I think Nigel and the reform team, and I'm aware of this because obviously I do speak to people from HQ, we are preparing for government. That's the first and foremost, and we're doing it in a really serious way. We're getting really structured head of policies in place. We're getting consultation with people that know what they're doing, not politicians stereotypically, but people that are experts in their field. So we are preparing for government in reform. In relation to the the Lords thing, you are 100% accurate. It is an actual point that on day one, we as reform will have to appoint a serious number of Lords if we are to get anything passed. Because the one thing that the general population are going to be so frustrated about is that if on day one the general population has voted for a reform manifesto, but we spend a year and a half or 2 years tied up in legislative back and forth between the Commons and the Lords rewriting things, it's going to make the general population wildly unhappy because they voted for something.
I think the big advantage that you've got over and above UKIP or the Brexit Party, the advantage that Reform has got, I always said that the big problem that Nigel Farage had was he had, if you like, generals and foot soldiers, but no sergeants. And I think now, with that large base of councillors and indeed political assistants and indeed, House of Commons parliamentary staff, I know there's not many of them, but you're now starting to say that there are kind of hundreds of sergeant-level competent people. And I think that is something that, it cannot be underestimated in terms of its importance.
No, it truly is accurate what you just said. And as I say, I've been to HQ many times. I speak to the team at HQ quite a lot, and it is a really well-oiled machine. They're professionalising themselves rapidly, fast. But I think the key point here, which I think is really impressive and something that really gave me assurance as being a reform councillor, is they're not just accepting anybody for job roles in HQ. They are really making sure that they get the right people, which, yes, sometimes means that they haven't got enough people in the office right now, because we're a huge party now, right? We've got over 250,000 members. We're polling massively, but we haven't got the army or the team like the other parties have got, because we're still new, we're still fresh. But I think it's really reassuring that they're not just hiring anybody, they're hiring the right people.
But what is going to be really, really difficult for you, and I think that David Bull et al. Have taken the right approach to this, but it's going to be very, very difficult. You have to remember that in many seats across the country, Reform is basically a one-man band, right? And or rather it was. And basically there are people who will have, run 2 or 3 times in a parliamentary seat. But now that seat is in play, those people, I think, may have to be disappointed, simply because what you need is a quality bench in the House of Commons. You can't just pick people because they were the people that ran when there was no hope of winning the seat. And I think that what David Bull has done, much as he's trying to be very, very sensitive to that issue, I think he's also pretty firm that you need quality people. And if that means disappointing somebody, then so be it.
Yes, and I think that shows good leadership, in my opinion. It's a difficult thing to do. I mean, the people, you've got to remember that Reform's been around for a few years now, and there was very few active campaigners in branches on grassroots levels back years ago. And, the people that they had stand in the general election last year were usually those grassroots people, but now they are professionalising. There's a lot more competition. There's a lot more competent people. There's a lot of councillors that are now being elected that are learning the job better and better every day. And you're right, you've got to have the right people in the MP seats. The last thing you want to do is elect 400 brand new MPs that have never been elected before, that have got no experience in politics before, to run a country. That is not something that would be acceptable, certainly in my opinion, in any capacity. We need the right people. And what we're doing now as Reform is we're now starting to think about that proactively. And what they've done is they've announced a clean slate. So there is currently nobody approved to stand for Parliament, including Nigel Farage himself, actually, I was told the other day. He's not even approved to stand for Parliament at this moment in time. Everybody has had the slate wiped clean. They're going to start the candidate process again from scratch. Everyone's going to have to go through assessment days. Everyone's going to have to go and prove themselves of why they deserve to be a Reform MP.
One of the things that I'd really like to see, George, and I begged the Conservative Party to do this, but of course they weren't interested. I think the other thing you really, really need to do is strengthen local associations. If it was left up to me, what I would do is have an HR advisor in those seats that are look like they're in play, that Reform may potentially win. And I think what you need to do is you need to say to yourself, hey, look, there's nothing wrong with 20 party members choosing the candidate. They are the Reform Party, that's fine. But they also need to have a good think about what they should look for in a candidate. What is their dream person? Now, that will vary from seat to seat, and there are some people who would be utterly terrible in one seat, who would be utterly brilliant in another seat. But as long as you're really clear on that, I think that's the important thing. Whereas, of course, what the Labour Party, the Conservative Party and the Lib Dems do is simply just try and impose somebody from the central party on a local area just because they want bums on seats in the House of Commons.
Yeah, look, as it being an MP, you've got 2 hats, right? You are representing your local constituents at all levels of government, local and nationally, and you are also making up laws for the country. You are governing departments. You are doing national things on a daily basis. So you do have to have the right people, and I think it's really important that local groups, local parties, local members can have a say on who represents them, because you need the backing and supporting of your local volunteers, your local campaigners, people that are going to knock the doors to you, people that are going to do the grassroots work for you. That's vitally important to an MP, vitally important. And parachuting people in is not something that's ever really too popular amongst any party, as you say, any party. That's not a popular thing.
I think sometimes it varies from place to place. I think there are places in the commuter belts of big cities where if you're not from the area, that's fine as long as you commit to moving to it. I suspect in somewhere like Portsmouth, if you weren't from Portsmouth, I think it would go down badly. But I think it's a case of horses for courses, realistically.
Look, whoever's the best of the job should be doing the job right, and I think that, and that's, I think, the most important thing as well. And as you say, there might be someone that's particularly good for one area that wouldn't be good, because you've got to remember, each constituency has different demographics.
Without a doubt.
They have, completely different demographics, a different need, different culture, different everything, different financial status, different healthcare service. So there are people that will be better for some areas than others. And it's right that we get the right candidates for those areas 100% with no questions asked. And if that means that you represent your area you live in, great. If it means you represent an area 20 miles up the road, that's okay too, as long as you are right for the community that you're standing for.
Okay, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Let's take a break, but I'll tell you one thing. We've had you on this show multiple times. I'm just really interested when we come back after the break, just to understand how you got into all this and what your impression is as a new councillor in Portsmouth about the challenge in local government. Look, we've got an expert here. We might as well ask him not just about the issues of the day, but what is the direction of travel in this country. More next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
OK, this is Talk, and this is Andre Walker. Asher Gould is on holiday, and Harry Cole is a little bit ill. And look, let me tell you, my dad has been visiting me all week. I've not really plugged myself into the news, so I think we're going to take it a little bit cash tonight. And we're joined by George Madgwick, who is the Reform UK leader on Portsmouth City Council. And you know, George, before the break, I mentioned I just wanted to understand where you've come from and how you've ended up in the position you're in and what you think are the big challenges. So first of all, are you somebody who used to watch and listen to Talk and then volunteered when you were a councillor?
No, I don't know how to do a short summary here, but yeah, if you asked me about politics 10 years ago, I couldn't have told you anything about it, nothing at all, in any capacity. I didn't study politics, I wasn't into politics. I couldn't have even told you who my local MP was. I think I knew about David Cameron, and that was about it. And I definitely struggled through my younger years, and I basically owned a business basically about 7 years ago now, and I had a problem with the business and I needed a councillor's support, and I tried to reach out to my local councillors and couldn't get hold of them for love nor money. You couldn't get an email from them, telephone call from them, couldn't meet them, and I just literally sat there one day and thought, you know what, I'm going to stand against you because I can't be any worse. I knew nothing about it, and I stood against them as an independent originally because, as I say, I didn't really know anything about political parties. So I just stood against them as an independent, and lo and behold, I won. And I was the first ever elected independent in Portsmouth's history. So I'll always remember that day when I got elected, and I stood on the steps, and they give you a big binder, a big folder of all these things you've got to do, and you've probably been through this process or know about this. And they left me to myself, and my friend said, well, what now? And I said, I haven't got a clue. You know, not a clue. I don't know anything about politics. So for me, it was a real steep learning curve, but I think it was great because I hit the ground running, and as an independent, you've got to wear so many hats at once.
I think the big difficulty, and one of the things that I would always recommend for people to do who go into politics, is the most boring thing on the planet, which is read the standing orders of the council. If you're a councillor, read the standing orders of the House of Commons, because even though it sounds dry and dull, just knowing how to put a motion down, knowing how to call a vote, knowing what you can do, what you can't do, where a petition goes, etc., you know, it's just so useful. Otherwise, you're just flailing around in the dark.
Yeah, and you're completely right. I'm glad you brought that up, because we got a new councillor elected in Portsmouth. We had a by-election just 3 weeks ago, and Reform won its first seat in Portsmouth, as in a win, not a defection. Absolute landslide. And when the councillor come into the office and he gave me the big binder that I got many years beforehand, he said, what's all this? So, yeah, there's about 1,000 pages in there.
Yeah.
And I said, you see that little book there of standing orders? He said, yeah. I said, scrap the rest for now, just learn the standing orders. As long as you know those standing orders, you've got them with you, you've got them revised, you'll be fine. Because you're right, the standing orders is a little book of rules for your council, and with that, it governs your meetings, what you can say, how to do motions, as you say, how to do everything, how to speak, how to talk, and it's your little Bible.
But this brings us back. This brings us back to the point we were making before the break about the fact that Reform now have more people. Because I remember there was a lot of concerns going into whichever local election it was, that literally, not that Reform candidates were idiots, not that they were bad, but they literally had no knowledge whatsoever of local government or indeed being a councillor. And what I said to, I think it was Nigel, it might not have been, but somebody, I said, look, what you have to remember is many of these local councils are major corporations with billion-pound budgets, right? They are going to predict who is going to be elected, and they're going to have all sorts of training ready to go. And so what's going to happen is you might have a big load of people who are completely clueless and wet behind the ears, but potentially a month in, these people are going to be of quite a high standard because of the level of learning that they will have been given.
Yeah, so on day one of becoming a councillor, you do like an induction course. You know, that's the standard thing you do. And then you go through a training procedure, and that can be training on planning rules, on licensing. You could be trained on transport traffic, and you can take optional courses. And not only that, you have access to something called the LGA training course, the Local Government Association training courses, which happen up in Wolverhampton. You can go up there and you can learn about leadership, how to be a cabinet member, how to be a financial member. You can do all sorts of things. And you're right, within a very short period of time, you can learn rapidly. And if you don't know something, you usually have a brilliant team of like executive assistants who know the council inside.
That was the interesting thing, by the way, George, because I think a lot of people were expecting reform councillors to pull out of the local government association on the grounds it's a quango. And I remember there being a serious discussion. First of all, I don't think reform told the councils what to do, but the prevailing view was that actually doing that training would actually be hugely beneficial. And even if, you know, the LGA is a quango, at the moment it's worthwhile staying in because you want to take advantage of that training.
Look, I've been involved in the LGA for a few years. I do agree it was very hard for me to get involved in the LGA to begin with. I make no secret about that. I tried for years to try and get involved and do more impactful stuff on a more national level for a local government, and I couldn't get my foot through the front door. It was near on impossible to get involved, but I did manage to get my foot through the front door through a fire committee, and the LGA can do some really good work. It really can, but you're right. It's very cliquey. It's very, you know, everybody knows each other, and they kind of don't want outsiders all the time. But you know, it does do some good work. But the thing is the councillors don't actually realise the amount of good work that the LGA can do either. They just kind of, you know, dispel it as that something that they just get a magazine once a month and that's all. But you know, the LGA conference is a really good event that happens every year where you get to meet local leaders. You do workshop classes.
I've just realised something. Harry Cole's going to be in his sickbed going, oh my God, we put Andre Walker in charge. He's talking about local government finance.
Do you know what?
That's going to be a ratings winner, isn't it?
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know, right? And the thing is that on national broadcasters, national TV, we don't talk about local government at all, really, as you know. But what I will say to Harry Cole sitting at home is that, and what I say to a lot of people that are voting, I'll say them on the doorstep, is that people don't realise that local government elections are, in my opinion, just as important, if not more important, than national. And the reason why is that the things that you do every day that affect your daily life, i.e. bin collections, your potholes, your roads, your planning application for your school or new houses up the road, your HMOs, your building, your infrastructure, all of that is decided by your local councillors, not by government, by local councillors.
There is another point to make about local government elections versus parliamentary elections, and this is going to sound incredibly dry, but what you have to remember is, in a local government election, this is not true in every single case, you're probably electing somebody with executive power. Most councillors actually do run the show. Whereas if you get to a parliamentary election, what you're probably only going to be voting for is someone to make legislation. You're not necessarily voting for a government. And therefore, actually, in terms of real powers, quite often a local council will have more real powers than a member of parliament. The reason for that is because, you know, a local council actually does run the corporation, whereas a member of parliament votes on legislation, and that's all.
And more often than not, a local MP has to go to a local councillor to get help on a local issue. You know, people assume that their local MPs can do anything for them locally, and they can't. They have to go to the local council, speak to local officers and other local councillors to do it. So you're right. If you're a backbench MP, you probably have less power than a local councillor that's in a cabinet position. But obviously, you know, at the end of the day, everyone becomes a member of parliament to try and get into government, right? To try and make change. And usually, as we've seen recently through Labour, absolutely destroy it in the process.
I've got to be honest with you. We're going to have to leave it there, George. But one thing that I will say to you, what amazed me about the Labour Party and what amazes me about Keir Starmer is that they've come into office with that big majority and they haven't really got any ideas or any thoughts. I always thought to myself, when I was in the leader's office at a local authority, I thought to myself, you know what? I've got 2,500 people working for me and I can, within reason, do whatever I want. That is not going to be true forever. So what do I want to do in these years? I can't understand anybody who takes political power and does sod all with it.
It's not doing sod all with it as well. It's the fact they've managed to just alienate everybody. I mean, it's almost like they had no plan. They've been in opposition for 14 years and come into government and did a disaster. I remember on election night when they absolutely romped home, and I sat there I was in one of the counts, and I sat there and thought, well, at least they got a big majority and they can actually make real effective change. And they've been a disaster. I mean, at every single angle, you know,
awful.
Cutting the winter fuel allowance. You know, there's so many decisions that they've made, which is an absolute disaster. And the Chagos Islands is one of my biggest bugbears. I think that is a disgrace. I think it's an absolute... That's one of those occasions I wish that the Sovereign could have stepped in and said, no, I'm not signing this off. I know it's difficult for the Sovereign to get involved, but that to me was treasonous. And,
totally.
You know, they've made these terrible, terrible decisions. The fact they've got this two-tier policing, the fact that they allow people to protest in balaclavas on one side of the debate and then don't on another side of the debate. They make some shocking decisions. They've lost control of the country, in my opinion, and I know we're not going to get a general election anytime soon, but I think it's needed.
Yeah, I think they'll limp on. OK, that's George Madrick. Thank you so much for coming on. He's the leader of Reform UK on Portsmouth City Council. Look, Harry Cole is ill. Asher Gould is on holiday. So we're just going to have a bit of fun. 0344 499 1000. Pete Barnes is going to come in and I think it's fair to say disagree that Reform's a good party. More next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
OK, this is The Late Show. Asher Gould is on holiday on his own in a flat in Eastbourne. Right. I just wonder what that's going to be like, right? I mean, it would be a bit Miss Marple if he was in a hotel, right? But he's literally just in a flat, just sat, God knows. Also, just to explain, Harry Cole is ill. I'm chilling out. My dad came to visit me this week, and therefore I've not really been watching the news. I'm not really interested, so I'm just having a general chat round. So, Pete, my first question to you, how are you?
I'm all right, actually.
You feeling good?
Well, yes, it's been one of those weeks this week where a lot has been going on, there's both in the news and all the rest of it, and I'm actually knackered this week, I won't lie. But, yeah, it's quite the week to tune out of, by the way.
Here's the interesting thing. You and I have worked together loads of times, and most people who watch our segments think that we're brilliant together. How many times it almost descend into violence?
Oh, so many times. We've locked horns more times than I can count, actually. But my favourite story about us, you don't realise it, was the first time I hosted.
Yes.
You announced it. I was told deliberately, don't say anything, because it hadn't actually been confirmed. I was told very clearly, don't post anything, don't say anything.
Do you know what Chuck Thomas, the producer, said? He gave me some advice. He said, listen, you and Pete just shouldn't go to the pub anymore. So we made a deliberate strategy to cease being friends.
Yes, pretty much.
And we've got on famously.
Yes, it's true, actually. We're better friends when we don't see each other.
So, okay, oh, God. All right, George Madgwick is back. Yes. I'll tell you what I want you to do. Give me your opinion on reform. I'll just let the two of you go off like a bomb. What is Farage getting wrong? I mean, I've always wondered with you, Pete, because I feel like politically we're probably fairly close.
Yeah.
But you've never bought the reform.
No, I don't drink I don't drink the Kool-Aid, I'm afraid, because...
Why not?
Because for me, it's about getting things done and the practicalities, and I just don't see it. The big problem I see in our politics is everybody talks a really good game, but then when they get the power, they don't know what they're doing, or they somehow start to blame everything else, when actually it's their inability to prepare properly to actually have competent policy to deliver on it.
Yeah, but my issue is this. Look, I have never changed my political... Well, I have slightly, but... Look, my view is I look at the 14 years of the Conservative government and just go, well, that was effing dreadful.
Yeah.
Right? And my point is, if they are going to stand by and do precisely nothing that their voters want, then somebody else is going to have to come in and deal with it. That's my argument.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I know when we were doing that was what it was. That's the position that you took. It was the same as probably most people listening right now. But my thing is, the practicalities of politics have come to bite us on the back, because... Look at the situation we found ourselves. You guys wanted to send a message. I'm now paying God knows how much in tax. I've got a crumbling society because people haven't lived in the reality of politics.
I don't think that George is trying to send, George Madgwick is trying to send a message. I think he literally now believes that the Conservative Party is an impediment to right-wing governments. George, is that a fair summary?
I think Conservative Party have had their day, and I think that we need to move aside for someone else. And I think that, look, the Conservative Party had its place for a century, you know, and I think that there has been times in recent history where they've done really well. But I think that people are ready for a change and a movement now. And I think Pete makes a good point. He says about the fact that Labour, you know, was a protest vote almost for a lot of people last year, and look at where that's led us. And that's not acceptable. And that's why, personally...
With respect, he wasn't making that point. He was saying by splitting the vote, Labour got a huge majority.
Yeah.
Correct, that's right. They got a huge majority. So by people voting the way they did, they got a huge majority. But but personally, I believe...
how exactly... Sorry to interrupt there, Judge, but how exactly have you helped the cause of right-wing politics by allowing the most socialist government to wander in? Simply because, at the time, Nigel Farage would rather play politics than actually do what was right by the country and actually stand down or work with the Conservatives. The biggest impediment to right-wing politics are the people involved in it, because we all can't stand each other and we can't work together because of egos. And I keep having to notice that everybody who seems to have a really good idea, who happens to be just a little bit more, say, competent than Nigel Farage, gets kicked out the window very quickly.
But Pete, what about the argument, which I think Nigel Farage would make if he was sat here? Look, the reality is the Conservative government was dire.
Yeah.
And ultimately, this central idea, we need to keep the Conservatives in power. All right, they're a bit better than Labour, but they're not much better, or they weren't much better. We're not talking about Thatcher anymore, are we?
No, but this has always been one of my big problems with the Conservatives in general, is move on from Thatcher. Stop trying to reheat 1983. Like, you know, move on. Actually do have this new thing. But my problem with reform and the way that they approach it is it's reactionary. You're not leading in any conversation. You also keep saying that everybody keeps calling you a protest party. If your arguments start with, yeah, but the Tories, or yeah, but Labour, you're defining it as a protest movement, not me.
I'm sorry, go on, George.
God, I was going to say, but I don't think that reform in recent history has been doing that. I think we've started to come out with our own policies. Nigel and the team, especially Zia Youssef, has taken a really proactive approach in bringing out new policies. We have put a head of policy in that's currently doing it. I mean, I know this because I'm involved in it from a back office point of view, where we are literally creating policy leads.
But they have, but I think George's point is this. The whole split the vote thing. Look, they're not idiots. They're not blind to that split the vote issue, and they accept that the Labour Party have come in. But where I think your argument falls down is this: what you say is predicated on the central belief that the Conservatives are going to fix the problems, and the reality is there's no evidence that's true.
Yeah, but there's also no evidence that they won't either. This is you can keep judging people on their past, but then if we're doing that, I'd like to point out the carnage that Nigel Farage leaves in his wake at every political movement he's ever been involved in.
It's not been ideal.
It's not great, and also his ability to stick around, not so great either. But this is my problem, is that I actually, do you know, most people might not know, but I'm not a member of the Conservative Party anymore. I've left the party because of this big problem, that it's the political party system that's the problem. And we talk about the uni party. Reform are just as bad as the uni party in every manner, because they need yes men, they need the institutions and the people around it to make it work.
But can I ask you this, Pete, as a central point, right? If there was a general election tomorrow and I said to you, Pete, vote for me or I will tell your partner that you're having an affair or whatever.
Yeah.
That would be a very serious criminal offence. Right. If I was then elected to the House of Commons and on a substantive piece of legislation, the Chief Whip walked up to me and said, you will vote for the government on this occasion or we will expose you're having an affair, that would be entirely legal.
Yeah.
Right. How does that make any sense?
It doesn't. And this is one of the reasons why I actually think listening to Restore is actually very good, because they want to bring back a sense of kind of morality and logic to Parliament, where actually if you get rid of that element by having high standards and you clamp down incredibly hard on people that actually break it, then you can actually kind of revigor British politics, but it's dying on its backside. Because let's look at the scandals that surround reform. It's always kind of, it's one rule for them, one rule for another. I look at the Sarah Poaching incident. Let's look at what's happened to Kent County Council, where they've kind of kicked members out because of the very same thing. There's one rule for one rule for another. That sounds very uni-party to me. Let's look at the Rupert Lowe incident. Where was the internal investigation? Where's the showing that we're different, that you're kind of wanting to change politics? I look at the situation over the Russian money links and all the rest of it. That was a great moment where Reform could have cut that out at the knees. Do you know what they did? They hid behind lawyers. It wasn't right. And if you want to say you're changing politics, be the change. You can't just keep saying it and pointing to things going, that's bad, and then doing the exact same thing.
But the system, I'll let George respond in a moment, but the system is a complete and total mess. We have a system where you are supposed to elect a local person, and that rule exists only on paper.
Yes.
In reality, you go into the ballot box and vote for which party leader you want. So what you're doing is you're literally running an election on general election day that bears no resemblance to what's actually happening.
Oh, without a doubt.
Because people go, I'm voting for Nigel Farage.
Yeah.
No, you're not. You're voting for Bob Jones in Southwark.
Yeah, who also could be the complete opposite of Nigel Farage, but still be a member of the same party.
Who could also defect at any point and go to another party. And I think there's 2 points that we're raising here. Number one, I think all three of us are basically campaigning for proportional representation, where a vote actually matters. Because what you're saying, Pete, is that the split of the vote.
I think that's a big jump there, George.
There's a bit of a jump there.
It might be a big jump, but if you're dissatisfied with how the first past the post system is working, you're saying the vote's split, then you should surely believe that every vote should matter.
I'll tell you what I'd like to do, Pete.
Sorry, just on that point. It's not first past the post that's the problem. It's the party machinery, not first past the post. The voting system is rather to the side of it. What you've got is the dominance of a political party holding an MP's livelihood, mortgage, and everything by the throat, and saying if you don't do as you're told, that's it, you're gone. Remember
in 1979, if you went into the ballot box and go, which one of them's the Labour candidate, the polling agent would not tell you, and it wasn't on the ballot paper. You needed to find out for yourself. I'll tell you what I'd do, George. Having thought about this, here is the change that I would make. I think probably what I'd do on general election day is have 2 votes. 1, vote for Prime Minister, and 2, vote for your local MP.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
And basically you put in an election for Prime Minister. Now, you'd have to have various things where, if they couldn't form a government, then there's various rules that come in. But it strikes me, if people want to go on general election day and vote for Kemi Badenoch or vote for Nigel Farage or, well, not vote for Keir Starmer, but then why not let them do that?
Yeah, because mentally that's where most of the voters actually are. And I do agree with you, that's probably a good way to get around it. But we have to get back into the culture that we are a parliamentary representative democracy. We're not America. So this idea that I hear so many people, particularly supporters of reform, saying, well, Nigel Farage will fix it. And I keep saying, how? And he'll say, oh, he'll just get in there and do it on day one. That's not how the system works.
Let me tell you how. Let me tell you how then, Pete. And I think the thing is that, I thought this was so refreshing when Nigel said it, and that the fact that he will bring in leaders of industry into cabinet roles that are experienced within those roles. He'll put them into the House of Lords to get them into the cabinet positions that we need them to. And I think that's...
It doesn't work. We tried it with David Cameron. It's absolute chaos. You cannot have a Chancellor of the Exchequer who is not held accountable by the House of Commons and then suddenly say that we're a functioning representative democracy. That system on paper looks fine, but in practical terms, it just doesn't work.
And we don't know that in this country yet. And
we do. We've got the Cameron example that he was not being able to be questioned.
I think the example is Lord Sugar.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
you've got loads of... I heard you talking about Lords reform, and you're right that Nigel has to do so much work to get anything done. He's got to tackle the House of Lords, and we've got to tackle the biases in Parliament.
But the big problem is, right, when I worked at the House of Commons, and I know you haven't been a parliamentary pass holder, neither of you, but you roughly know the way it works. Look, can I tell you what I did not do? What I did not do? I did not walk into my office at 9 o'clock in the morning. Well, I didn't walk in at 9 o'clock.
No one believes that.
I didn't walk into my office at 10:30, right? But I didn't go, what votes are on today?
Yeah.
What legislation are we going to amend? Which way are we voting on this? We didn't do any actual legislative work. All that happened was somebody'd phone up and go, my cat died, can you help me? We do things like that. We do constituency surgeries. But there was no... I don't remember ever having a conversation... And I'm not slagging off the MP I work for because he's not unique in this respect. I don't remember ever going, which way should we vote on this bill? Yeah. We didn't do it.
No, because
there is no Parliament.
That's where it's completely wrong. And I'm not a personal fan of the whipping system at all. And I think that's where me and Pete can probably see eye to eye on this one, is that I think that the residents elect you as an individual, and you should be able to vote on behalf of the residents and their wishes. Now, sometimes the needs of the residents in, say, Devon will not be the same as those in Durham. And I think it's really poor that MPs have to vote that way. And we've had it in Portsmouth with the WASPy women. I don't know if you know about the WASPy women debate, but we've had it in Portsmouth where our Labour MPs campaigned heavily on, we will support WASPy women, we will do everything for WASPy women, we will and as soon as it came up to a vote, they disappeared from the face of earth. And they didn't stand up for it because they were whipped to told not to. And as you know, Pete, and you both know that they, as you just pointed out, they've got to, because if they do not follow the whip, they lose their jobs, they lose their houses.
I'm going to cut it short because we do need to go to a break. Let's all hang round and come back. But I will tell you what happens in the House of Commons. You're going to hate this, and indeed the House of Lords. You'll get your phone and it says a text message from the whips, votes imminent, and it literally lists in the first vote, vote yes, in the second vote, vote no, in the third vote, vote yes, fourth vote, vote no. And literally, they don't even pick up the piece of paper to know what they're voting on. They just say yes, no, based on what a text message has come from the whips. That is not a legislator at all. Back in a moment.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Yes, this is Talk. Harry Cole is ill, so I'm sitting in, well, kind of extending the late show. Asher Gould is off in Eastbourne. So you know what we're doing? We're just chilling. We're just taking it cash. I've got Pete Barnes, the political strategist here, and I've got George Madrick, who is the Reform UK leader on Portsmouth City Council. George, I haven't got any particular question for you, because as I say, I'm just relaxing here. But I just feel like you should say something now, because you haven't said anything in a little while. Well,
I appreciate that.
Feel free to say whatever you want, within reason.
Within reason.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Thanks for that. And hopefully Harry Cole's watching at home, really engaged with this conversation.
He's thinking this interview style is absolutely dreadful.
It's certainly different for a Thursday evening. But listen, I always think that it's better to be on the inside spitting out than the outside spitting in. And I think that, I think Pete obviously knows his stuff, and I think he's been in the industry for a long time, and I've been on a lot of shows with Pete now, and his opinion's always really good and really valid, and I like his debating style. But I think that he should come on the inside of these things and make the change. If you're not happy with how the system works, come in and change it with us. Come in and change it. And I think what you said in relation to the House of Commons almost makes me feel sick, to be honest with you, in relation to the fact that you get a text on your WhatsApp before the morning. I just think that's appalling. I mean,
but also, can I just throw this at Pete? So look. Big changes in the Red Wall. Right, Lee was won by the Conservatives. I think, for my money, I think Lee is going to become a safe reform seat.
I think most
and
of
I think Nandi is finished in Wigan.
I think she's done, yeah.
So why? So look, I get all the points that you've made about splitting a vote, but as a Wiganer, surely you must be saying to yourself, which is the Conservative Party most likely to win in Wigan? That is Reform.
Oh, yeah. OK, so from a practical standpoint, yes, of course, Reform...
I mean, you also live in Fulham, so I think...
They're going to take, loads... They'll take most of the Red Wall without any shadow of a doubt. My question is, what about the next general election after that? Will Reform actually deliver on anything? Because my big fear when it comes to Reform is expectation management doesn't exist. So therefore, they've promised all this great change, all this stuff, and if it doesn't materialise in any way that many voters expect it to, that entire voter base is gone. Yeah, but they're out of politics.
But what they're going to do, I'll let George respond to that, but what they're going to do, for better or worse, is rather than having a manifesto, they're going to have a legislative programme. Now, I'm not saying it's going to work, but by the time, should Farage win, if Farage wins, he will know month by month what legislation he's putting through, and that will have been debated in advance. Now, I admit this is something that's been inspired by Donald Trump quite recently, but that is... Right, I'm not saying that Nigel Farage will be a successful Prime Minister, but that approach is more likely to succeed than just having a manifesto.
I don't think so, because of events, dear boy, events.
Okay.
A process and an agenda works well in a corporation because it's lots. You can predict it a lot better. If you're the Prime Minister, your day is about 1,400 different things, and one of them could dominate and take out the rest of them.
Whatever happens, no matter how much you're blown off course, if you have a very strong idea of what you want to do, you are going to be better than if you didn't.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt.
I mean, sorry, it's like with anything. If you have structure in place, you know what you're going to. And any good business has structure. They have plans, they have forecasts, they have things they want to do in the future. And you're completely right. Even now, as I say, because I'm involved in these conversations, I keep repeating the same thing, but I'm involved in these conversations where they're currently coming up with these ideas and policies and really fine-tuning them and looking at getting consultation from their members and councillors and elected people to kind of shape what the reform policy is going to be. But it is definitely a different approach to doing it.
But what happens, George? So I don't think Pete's concern is the right concern. The concern that I would have, first of all, would be on the legislative programme. I think we're all agreed that Danny Kruger et al. Is sorting out. My concern, if I was a party manager for Reform, would be, hang on a second, are we actually going to win a majority in the House of Commons, or are we going to have 350 individuals just doing whatever the hell they liked and just running here, there and everywhere? Because the one thing, George, and I appreciate that the world is slightly different, Nigel Farage has a solid track record of being incapable of whipping his bench.
I think that history does potentially show that, but I think Reform is a different beast altogether. And I think that people are loyal to Nigel and trust in Nigel and believe that Nigel is the right person to lead this party and lead the country. We firmly believe that. And when I used to, because I was in UKIP back in 2014, I think it was, and you are kind of right in a sense that it wasn't that. But a lot of people have a lot of objective opinions, and it was a different atmosphere.
I mean, it was the awkward squad. Let's be honest, wasn't it?
It would, it was. But nowadays it's professionalised. Nigel's learned a lot over the last couple of decades. He's been involved. This isn't, as you say, Pete. It's not his first rodeo.
No.
And hopefully we've learned from those first rodeos. He's also surrounded himself with new people with fresh ideas, fresh professionalism. Yeah, he has. Yeah, absolutely, he has.
I think he's got more people than he had in the past.
Yeah, that's true.
But Pete, are you? And I'm not being critical if this is your view. Are you genuinely saying to me that you think Kemi Badenoch would be better than Farage?
Yes.
Why?
Because she's supported by the institution and the structures around it. The one thing Reform don't have is the middle bit. They have no internal support mechanisms.
More so now, though.
Yes, they've got more, but 0 to 1 is not as much as, 10, if you know what I mean. So it's easy to say that they've got more than they had because they didn't have anything before, but I'm not really seeing any kind of major movement with the internal structure because, let's be real, Nigel Farage isn't even an elected leader of the party. They don't even have members. Do you remember when Zia Yusuf was running around saying they had all these great barristers bringing up the Constitution? The one they brought out was a rehash of the previous thing.
I will say one thing, and I just want to throw this out to viewers and listeners, simply because I think the majority of them are not going to know this. Remember, in the Conservative Party, what is it? 42 regional young Conservative chairmen, 500 local branch chairmen, and you might have somebody who's been a party member for 30 years. The Conservative Party, and this is true of the Labour Party as well, in general, literally, they have thousands of people who on their own could run the general election with a laptop. I'll tell you what I'm going to do, Pete. I'm going to leave that. I'll tell you what. Look, George, do you fancy doing the paper review with us?
Yeah, let's do the paper review.
All right, I'll tell you what.
Why not?
Look, we're all chilling out, we're just relaxing here, having a bit of fun. The paper review is coming up just in a couple of moments. If you want to call me, 0344 499 1000. I think we've built up quite a nice little team, haven't we, Pete?
Yeah, definitely.
And the fact that I'd largely given up drinking and my dad got out the cocktail machine, means I'm a little bit delicate. So I think we don't.
So we're in to do the heavy lifting, are we?
Yeah, we don't want to get tetchy and angry and argumentative. I think what we need to do is just relax into it and have a bit of fun. And you can get involved as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can follow me on YouTube. It's Andre Walker. That is where the fruity stuff goes to live, believe me. We're going to be back just in a couple of minutes with the press preview of tomorrow's papers.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Okay, this is the press preview with Andre Walker, Pete Barnes, and I think we've got George Madrick. But before we get to the front pages, Pete, how'd you hijack a train?
I don't know. I really want to know
Train
this.
can do three things: go forward, go backwards, or stop.
Well, it's a British one, so God knows.
It's not like you can say
turn on time.
somebody hijacked a train and took it to Saint-Tropez.
Yeah.
No, it will either go straight forward.
I don't understand. There's such a weird terminology that they've used there. I don't understand that one. But yeah.
Yeah.
Can somebody ring in and text in how you hijack
and just to be clear, if you want to stop a train, you just turn the electric off, and that's the end of it. Right?
It's not a particularly difficult thing.
Just, look, I don't want to be disparaging, but the mind boggles. So I'll tell you what we're going to do now. We're going to say the most inauthentic thing in British media. Pete, what did you notice in the papers today? Which is code for, what did the producers tell you to talk about?
What have you been briefed to talk about? No, but honestly.
I love it. By the way, we're doing a press preview. George doesn't even have the papers.
No, I know,
winging it. Winging it.
Good luck, George. No, but
George Madrick is from Reform UK, just to remind everyone.
Yeah, but no, this is a real tragic story. This is of Sarah Sharif, this young little girl who was basically ignored, belittled, and sadly lost her life at the hands of identity politics. I'm afraid there's no other way to put it. You know, we can talk about council ineffectiveness and all these.
The suggestion is in the Daily Mail. Look, I'm just going to be explicit with this. The suggestion is that because she was from a Muslim background, effectively social services thought, well, look, you know, it's a bit more violent in a Muslim house than it is in a Christian home. And basically just allowed the abuse to continue. You know, I do feel very sorry for ordinary moderate Muslims because they always get blamed for this stuff, don't they? I mean, idea.
I'm sorry. So I have this thing on that comment because I was on here after the Manchester bombing thing, and I make it very clear: no mosque really came out very forcefully against any of it that happened. Not in my opinion. And I'll say the same with this situation here. If I was a member of the Muslim community, I'd be in uproar about this. I'd be absolutely in uproar. Where are you? It's not up to everybody outside of the community to kind of make your community look better or, you know, reinvigorate its image. And this is my big problem
I will say one thing, George, and it has been a bugbear of Pete's. And I just want to assure you that Pete's not got a downer on anybody.
No.
But one of the things that, well, not, you're an equal opportunity next Tuesday.
Yeah.
But here is the interesting thing, isn't it? Because for whatever reason, and I think it's probably got more to do with the nationality and background of these people rather than the religion, there is a tendency amongst British Muslims to prioritise reputational support over doing the right thing, and you tend to find things like, oh well, you know, rather than stop grooming gangs, let's just pretend it doesn't exist. And I think that there's always. And that caused a lot of problems, George. And I think Pete, I don't know what your view is on this, George, but I think Pete's point, look, it is time for these people to stand up and not tolerate certain behaviours within their community. I don't think it's unreasonable for him to say that, is it?
I don't think it is either. It's you know, it's such a sad story. And I was listening today and heard that the poor girl was also wearing a burqa.
Yes.
And the authorities didn't feel like they could ask her to take it off or to remove it or to check her physically. And I'm under the understanding that the parents put her in their burqa because obviously she was bruised and damaged and so on and so forth. And as I say, our institutions are people that are meant to protect our children felt that they couldn't do their job effectively through the fear of being called racist or discrimination. And that's a really sad incident. And I know that there's been calls to turn the council into special measures because people don't feel that the council now are responsible to care for children. And I think that's a really good point. And I think that if there's institutional fear of being called a racist, and by definition that stops you being able to actually look after the children in your care, then you should probably be put in special measures.
Can I just follow up on that? I think the entire country needs to be put into special measures at this point, because why is it systematically we seem to let down children, the most vulnerable people, and the people that need us to step up and be the best we can be? We let them down at every single turn. And as it comes for institutional, I don't really like that phrase. It's people. Who's creating that environment? Who's going after saying don't do that? Because institutions are just a letterhead and a postcode. It's people that make up institutions. So who's leading this?
But if you think directors of departments,
exactly. So fire them.
But if you think about it, sorry about that. I don't mean to talk over each other, but if you think about this, right? Grenfell Tower, absolutely dreadful. The cladding was dangerous. That never should have happened. But remember, the people who built or refurbished Grenfell Tower didn't break any laws simply because they did what they used the materials that were approved. It was all signed up. And I remember local authorities going, well, we've put this dangerous cladding up and down the country. What we need is more fire inspectors. I would suggest you need to sack the ones that have approved. I mean, you know, what? So basically, remember, in Grenfell Tower, it wasn't that nobody inspected the cladding. It's that the bloke whose job it was to inspect the cladding didn't know it was dangerous. That's entirely different.
You've also got this thing in councils, and I know this from first-hand experience, where civil servants are almost untouchable. If some of these civil servants were in the private sector, a lot of them wouldn't survive a month of employment. They would be let go. But because the employment issues in the civil servant life, where we struggle to employ or retain staff, they seem to get away with things that you would never get away with in the public authorities. And that sets a precedent. That sets a mentality that you can almost get away with anything because you're almost untouchable. And that is a systemic issue, but that stems from the directors. At the end of the day, the buck stops at the top, right? If the chief executive or directors say, this is our policy, this is what we're doing, grow a backbone, they grow a backbone. And equally, political leadership, the leaders of the council set the tone for the officers. And in some councils, officers lead the councillors, and in some councils, the councillors lead the officers. But at the end of the day, the buck stops at the top. So you're right, Peter, to draw out that institutionalisation is just kind of a word to throw away the direct responsibility. But make no mistakes, there are people that are responsible for this, and they should be held accountable.
I make the same point over the grooming gangs. I hate it when people say, oh, West Yorkshire Police Force. Name the person. We have to start naming the people, because the way that these things often go is they hide behind institutional names and phrases and this kind of stuff. They use the language to obfuscate accountability. And the prime example of this is Tim Davie. Everybody's running around saying, oh, well, he's gone. He resigned. He should have been sacked. You want to change the country standards, and you heavily enforce them.
But Pete, what about Sadiq Khan? There are no grooming gangs in London. Oh, well, in that case. I mean, that was just garbage.
Yeah, it was.
He basically he didn't know, didn't care, just made it up. Oh, it's interesting. So the only place with no grooming gangs in the country is London. Oh, by the way, they have literally prosecuted people in Stratford. And he's still saying there are none.
But equally, the issue is, though, is that within constitutions, written constitutions on governmental level and local level, it says that you're not allowed to bring your authority into disrepute. That is one of the rules and the conditions of the Constitution. So you're basically instructed not to name officers. You're instructed not to throw anybody under a bus, and that's constitutionally written. You can't go against that, and that's where the fundamental problem comes. So then the institution can take the blame rather than the person. And I 100% agree with Peter on this one. I think there should be an absolute change, legislative change, to make people identifiably responsible.
Yeah, one of the worst bits of law that we have right now is the Local Government Act. That has protected local councils from ineffective representation, and it has strangled so many services because councils they have got such a workload, it's just ridiculous. And then we whack the Local Government Act on to protect incompetence. It's ridiculous, and it's got to be repealed.
I remember when I worked at Maidenhead Town Hall, we had this, the head of HR was also a member of the trade union. Right? So, I mean, she was just the most compromised person you'd ever... But one day, as a cost-saving measure, we attempted to reduce the redundancy payment from this gold-plated redundancy to the burnt legal minimum. And she sat there and she went, we'll never recruit the best people unless you have a good redundancy package. I said, who the hell? She said, we said to her, listen, who asks about the redundancy package at the interview? And she goes, you'd be surprised. No, I wouldn't be.
No,
How many people walk into a job and they go, have you got any questions for us? What's the redundancy package like? Who's going to ask that?
It's ridiculous. But, you know, it's quite concerning that one of the people who's most likely to take over as DG of the BBC is the head of diversity. Has no editorial experience, no actual experience in running an organisation like that, but they tick a box. And that mentality is one of the things we've got to get rid of as well.
I've got the best local government story of them all. This is absolutely superb. I won't say which local authority it was, but we had this bloke who was the head of alcohol inspection.
And I want that job.
He loved it. He had his little Motorola walkie-talkie and his high-vis jacket and all this. And he, for whatever reason, he literally... how should I say this politely? He literally mounted my leg for about 6 months about getting a sniffer dog, right? We're like, why do we want a bloody sniffer dog? They cost about 20 grand, right? So anyway, he gets this sniffer dog and he comes in, honestly, he's absolutely delighted. He comes in and he goes, oh, you're not going to believe what happened to me the other day. I went, what? He said, oh, we went out with all the lads and the sniffer dog, right, to the train station, yeah? What we did was we were doing the sniffer dog. We were checking people for drugs as they got off the train. We pulled a guy to one side, and when we opened his bag, he had prescription drugs in there. It wasn't illegal. What do you think of that? I said, Alan, you can't arrest people at the train station on a drugs operation. You're the alcohol inspector. It's a serious criminal offence. He went, I don't know why you're being so negative. I'm not being negative. You can't arrest people on drugs charges. You are not a police officer. You don't have a warrant card. And he said, I think you're just being very negative.
Honestly, my grandfather always used to say that the Third Reich will return with a British civil servant and a high vis and a clipboard. You know, you give the people like that amount of power, and they will run rampant with it. And I think Britain's a very perfect example of it.
I mean, are we, George, now just a nation of government inspectors?
Yes, and also we're a nation of people that hire people that are not qualified for the job because they tick a box. And I was in a meeting. Once again, I'll do what you just did and say, I'm not disclosing what meeting or with whom, but I was in a meeting where I was literally told that weight was being put on their colour, religion, culture and background, so over their talent. And one particular person said in this meeting, a very powerful person said in this meeting, I would rather have somebody with no experience that knows this part of life than someone without that part of life with experience. And we sat there like, what are you talking about? You're employing somebody into the civil servant that's being paid by the taxpayer, and you're saying you'd rather hire somebody based on the colour of their skin or their culture or their ethnicity rather than their background or talent.
I think there has been a long established view in local government that part of the role of local government officers is to give employment opportunities to ethnic minorities. And it's always struck me that is an odd proposition.
It's an odd proposition, but also you are doing over minority communities because you're putting them in positions that they can't perform well in. When they fail, that is the reason why they failed. It's their minority status. It's not the fact that they were put in a position they should never have been in. So I look at this where you kind of see all the kind of diversity hiring and everything. I was like, look at the turn away from, say, gay rights and things like that. Look at how we turned against the migrants because of these situations. Because we have put people in narratives that they're not qualified for, and you set them up for failure. The people trying to help them are causing them more harm, and it's right across government and right across local government in particular.
I mean, is it that bad, George, from your perspective in Portsmouth City Council?
Yes, absolutely. Once again, not naming names, but I was in a meeting where they employed somebody where their qualifications weren't as high or their experience wasn't high as somebody else. And that other person that was so experienced ticked all the boxes of experience, of knowledge, of qualifications, of years of service. The other person did not, but they had a certain number of characteristics that were palatable to some. And that person got the job over the other person. And I was the only person in the room going, is this crazy? What are we doing? And I remember having a right rant about it. And that was my first...
When I worked at the Greater London Authority, I was told that when I went for the job interview, the head of HR would only ask one question about diversity. And at the end of it, she said, Andre didn't sound very sincere in his answer on that. Well, really? Did you think? Did you think? Look, let's go to the front page of the Daily Star and have a look at Sarah Ferguson. Look, I'm just going to throw this out. What should Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and Sarah Ferguson now do?
Go away.
OK.
Yeah,
so
I don't
no
care.
helping with the...
I don't care. I'm out of caring about these two. They are the dregs of society. They hang around with the worst people, and I think you judge a person by the company they keep. I think that's a firm rule when you look at this lot. And they have made this situation for themselves. Live in it. I'm sorry, I'm done.
But George, I've previously said that I think Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor via Zoom should go and help the US investigate. I don't think he will, but actually, given his reputation, I don't know that it could be any worse. And actually, by helping people out, he might actually get not kudos, but scrape out just some dignity from the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Pete. I'd rather never speak about him again. I think he is an awful human being. I'm happy to say that. I think, regardless of what he has done or hasn't done, and I think I do remember you mentioning before that, what else can he lose? In his world, I mean, he's got a lot more than most of us, but, in his world, what else could he possibly lose? He's at the rock bottom of society in his little circle or his little clique. But rightly so. And I think the reason why he doesn't come clean, the reason why he doesn't go and do these inquests, the reason why he doesn't speak honestly is because I think, personally, this is only a personal opinion, I think he knows a lot more and has got a lot more to hide than he's letting on. And yes, maybe what that situation was immoral but not illegal. However, I think it opens up a whole can of worms. I think
one of the things that I would say about him is, look, I've never been in his shoes, thank God, but it strikes me that, number one, this is a grand person. To lose the princedom and to lose the dukedom, I think will have hurt a great deal. But also remember this, that this is somebody who is so radioactive that they won't even let him live at a proper royal palace, right? He is somebody who cannot walk the streets. They've put him in, what is it, Sandringham, Balmoral, wherever
Balmoral.
Yeah, whichever one it is. Basically, because it's the size of Reading, and he'll never come off the estate ever again.
Yeah, well, that's the hope, I suggest. But for me, it's one of these things that I do think that Charles has dropped the ball on this one, and he could have cut a lot of this off if he'd have acted a lot sooner. I don't like to disrespect her memory, but the Queen should have dealt with this.
I have to say to you, Queen Elizabeth II was many things, but I have to say, paying off a sex abuse victim in order to avoid somebody being properly scrutinised for it with £12 million is a disgrace.
And then also to be heralded as a person who put duty first. I'm with you on that one.
I think most people who were heads of state, if they were presidents, would lose the presidency over that. I mean, paying somebody off in that way is just as far from acceptable as it's possible.
Let me just make it very clear. I wouldn't pay somebody £1 if I was 100% innocent or something. I wouldn't do it because I would fight it to the death if I was innocent. And
I think the other problem is, George, of course, when the emails were published from what was at the time Prince Andrew, it wasn't who the hell's this loony, it was what are we going to do to counter this. I mean, if an email came in, Bob Jones says that Andre Walker thumped him, I mean, my message to my boss would be, I've never heard of this bloke, who the hell is he? Not let's try and undermine him and whatever. That all says I know who this person is.
Yeah, but I go back to the original, that interview that he gave with Emily Maitlis. I think that showed the kind of person that he was, that he thought that went well and that was a good idea. I think that shows a man of great arrogance, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why they did all the paying off, because you put a man like that on the stand, and he's going to get himself into even more trouble because of his arrogance.
I'll tell you what I thought about that, George, and look, this is purely just me speculating based on my own previous experience. That sort of performance is symptomatic of somebody who, when they sit down to rehearse their lines, they are sitting with people who have been trained to not say anything contradictory. If it was me, describing a child sex offender as unbecoming behaviour, right? No. But I don't sweat. His advisors should have said, this is ludicrous, stop saying this. But of course, I think he had people who just agreed with him.
They're completely out of touch, and you can't challenge them. And in the political world, when you get to those levels, you have these rehearsal scenarios, right, where you sit in rooms, and you both know this. You've probably both been in those rooms where you have other people challenge you. They throw you curveball questions. They keep you off guard, and then they do consultate. And that's the kind of level of training Andrew should have had for an interview such as this. And it appears he didn't just have a little training; he had no training, because he was answering the questions was completely unrelatable. He wasn't down to earth. He didn't come across as a man of the people, and he was answering with such unreasonable questions.
But Pete, if he was one of your clients, you would sit down and you would say, first of all, the question that I would always ask, are you in a position to plausibly deny this?
First question.
Forget whether you're guilty or innocent. Are you in a position?
In our world, we don't. That's not really the issue that we deal
and remember,
with.
we don't enjoy attorney-client privilege. So, are you in a position to credibly deny this, plausibly deny it? Also, the next question is, how bad's it going to be? I'll give you an example. A very dear friend of mine went on a stag do when he was a Tory MP, and in a crass joke, they all dressed up as Nazis, right? It was supposed to be taking the mick. He shouldn't have done it. And basically, I wrote his line, and it said, I turned up, I didn't wear this costume myself, I didn't know they were going to do it, I'm very, very sorry. What he didn't tell me was he'd hired the outfit. What I would have said then to him is, they're going to find the hire shop because they're going to phone out. You have to just accept. So the point
particularly if you're on the right of politics, you have to come out with the truth of everything.
Knowing that the Epstein emails were going to be published, he needed to take that into account.
Yeah, and the prime example of this is Peter Mandelson.
Yeah.
The fact that they didn't dig deep enough on a party political level, not within the security service, but on a political level, to see the toxicity of what was about to happen, tells me of a government that is so kind of, oh, it's fine, it doesn't matter, that kind of thing. That stuff is the bit that matters quite a lot, and I'm going to say it's the first question: can you plausibly deny it, and how bad is it going to get?
Yeah, George, sorry, you were saying.
I was going to say the small C conservative people amongst us and the people that sit on the centre-right of politics were the type of people that we would rather someone hold their hands up and say, I did it, I made a mistake, I was in error. We're more sympathetic to those. I think a lot of people on our side of politics, what we don't like is outright liars.
I think the problem, my argument about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is, in a sense, please do not take this out of context. It doesn't matter whether he's guilty or innocent. Please don't take that in the wrong way. The reason I make that point is, by failing to cooperate with the investigation, that in of itself is incompatible with holding high office in the United Kingdom, in my view. So even if he'd done nothing else other than fail to cooperate with the FBI, I would see that as enough reason for him to be thrown out of the royal family.
If you hold high office of any type in the United Kingdom, you go to court.
Yes.
That's the standard. That is the standard. It's not how do we weasel out of it, how do we kind of use the language or any of that stuff. It's you go and you be held accountable, and it is up to the jury or whatever to see whether you're guilty or not. That is how it has to work. But one thing I will say is we've got to allow systems to work. We seem to keep thinking that everything is a grand conspiracy all the time. Most of it is incompetence.
I think the one thing that I would say to absolutely everybody, I've sat on 5 juries in my life, which is quite kind of unusual. Very few people have ever done that. But I will tell you that when the prosecution stand up, the case can sound incredibly bleak. Like, this person is just absolutely banged to rights. When you hear the defence, things can change. Do I believe that Prince Andrew Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has behaved properly? No, but I am aware that these things can sound pretty bad until you hear the other side. George, I'll give you the final word before we go to the break.
My final word would be, let's speak to your colleague, Jeremy Carr, and ask Andrew to do a lie detector test, live on air on TV.
Yeah, because that ended well.
We should,
Anyway, that's a great idea, isn't it? Yeah. That's a great idea. OK, this is the press preview. Just to explain, Asher Gould is on holiday. We've got Pete Barnes and George Madgwick. We're going roughly through the papers, but you know what? We're trying to take it cash today as well.
Take a big view.
Yeah, I just feel like we don't want to get too tetchy. We don't want to get into, arguments or whatever. We're just going to have a bit of fun. And remember, in the next hour, you can phone me up, 0344 499 1000. I think I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slots available. That means if you ring now, you'll get through to one of the producers, and you will be coming on at midnight. We'll be back just in a couple of moments.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yes, this is the press preview with Andre Walker, Pete Barnes and George Madrick. Just to explain, Asher Gould is on holiday. Look, front page of The Guardian. But do you know what I want to do? And you can answer this, Pete, George, in any way you want. Forget Panorama. Forget Trump. Forget the BBC. What do you want from the BBC, Pete? Do you want it to disappear? Do you want it to be reformed? Do you see a value in it? What do you actually want?
I think that's the big question. I've never really been one of these just bash the BBC for the sake of it. My big problem is it's more the people that work for the BBC that I don't like, because they've taken a great institution and just ruined it, because they don't understand the people anymore. They're so detached from reality and the actual state of the nation that they become a kind of their own PR machine in a way. But in terms of I was going to say, in terms of what I think needs to happen, what I would like to see is just basically an understanding of, again, accountability, standards, and actual procedure that makes sense, and more transparency. The BBC falls down because it shuts the door. That's the big problem.
In defence, George, I'll put this to you. In defence of the BBC, news has changed. 20, 30 years ago, you would just report the facts, whereas nowadays, all of it is opinion. And we talk today from literally a company that does opinion. talkTV is not a news channel in the conventional sense. It's a debate show, really. It's about discussion. And so that does make it more difficult for the BBC, because it's very easy to report, as an example, Keir Starmer went to Madrid to meet with the the Spanish Prime Minister. But it's harder with, should we leave the European Union? Let's have a debate. But let's let George answer that.
The thing is, though, and I'll come back on this, is that the BBC, with all due respect, viewing figures should be irrelevant to them. Like you guys and like any other commercial station that's paid for by advertisers and so on and so forth, they have an obligation to reach viewing figures, right? BBC are paid by the taxpayer, by, in my opinion, a stealth tax, because it gives them the ability to not care about viewership. They should care about impartial, factual reporting. And yes, I know media has changed, etc., but BBC don't have to, because they don't have the pressures like commercial agencies do.
Can I ask you a question? Right, here is a quiz question. Don't get your phones out. Right, the year the licence fee was invented, who was the president of Russia and who was the president of the United States of America?
Probably Reagan and Gorbachev.
Warren G. Harding and Lenin.
Really? Wow.
Lenin. Right.
No. But can I just say, to answer your question, I think George bang on, is actually you define roles in the media within the BBC. So you don't have the same people giving their opinion and giving the facts. We've blurred together this kind of commentator, a journalist, editorial editor, and all this kind of thing. It's vague terminology that has led to people believing that a journalist is giving their opinion and no one believing anything anybody says anymore, because you've not defined the role. Because the BBC is, like you say, there's a very unique position, unlike every other media organisation, because it is paid for by the taxpayers. So it gets to really say, your job is this, this.
But what has gone even worse about the BBC is this, right? Donald Trump attempted a coup d'etat on, what was it, the 7th of January, 6th of January. Right. The BBC believes that to be true. It's bull. Yeah. It simply isn't true. Right, what took place, and just for those of you who don't know, after every single presidential election, there is a debate in Congress, in the Senate, as to whether to confirm or not confirm the election. That is the proper place to raise concerns about the electoral. And I will say to you, every election has vote rigging, every election has malpractice. The question is whether it affects the result. Right, okay. But that was the proper forum. Why would Trump want to derail that? People were going to argue for his position in the Senate. The only reason that didn't happen is because some idiot stormed them.
Yeah, and let's also not forget that when Trump won the first time, the same people who were up in arms about Trump making a comment about this committee wanted the eradication of the Electoral College because Trump won. So again, the outrage bit is never even. And to bring it back to the BBC on this point, it's they don't care about the truth
No.
Because they have an opinion, and they think that their opinion is more important because it's about protecting society. They believe that their job is about protecting democracy. You protect democracy by telling the truth, not by pushing what you think is the nicer version of things and demonising people that you think are a threat. The BBC is being brought down by its friends more than it's ever been brought down
George,
by the right.
I mean, the other thing is, I watched the debate on the BBC, and in fact, I saw a similar one on Channel 4. The implications of the Trump ballroom. Now, I would say to you, look, it may well be that the Trump ballroom is there because Donald Trump doesn't want to leave office. It could well be that he's attempting a coup d'etat. It could well be that he's attempting an armed insurrection. Or it could be what he has said. The White House doesn't have a ballroom, and therefore at state banquets we have to pitch a tent in the garden, and that is crummy.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I would suggest to you that no longer pitching a tent was probably his reason for building the ballroom, rather than some huge...
Yeah, it's also a guy who builds giant towers and calls them Trump Tower. He's a guy who leaves a legacy. Yeah. That's what he does. That's this entire term is nothing more than legacy building.
George, nobody seems willing to accept in the BBC the reason that he's building a ballroom is because the White House doesn't have a ballroom.
Because he has to be the villain.
Yeah.
He has to be the villain.
I was going to say, he does. He has to be the villain of the story. But this is where it's fundamentally wrong, right? Because BBC shouldn't be painting a villain. They should be painting a balanced argument. They shouldn't be taking the sides of the Democrats, all the Republicans, all the Conservatives, or Labour, or Reform, or Greens, or anybody else like that. They should be given balanced journalism. The one thing I will credit BBC on, which is very rare because I'm not a big fan of it, is their local journalism is actually quite good. Like, you know, I don't know if you like their regional programs. They are usually very balanced, very factual. You know, if you watch the news at 6:30 and they go to your region, it's usually very narrow, linear, very, very linear, and it stays to the point. It's factual. It's a little dull sometimes, but once again, I don't mind it being dull. It's factual.
Can I pick you up on something you just said? It's not balanced news they need to do. It's neutral news.
Neutral.
Because balance and impartiality are not the same thing. This is what the BBC have got really wrong. Balance is asking both sides 10 questions. Neutral is looking at a situation and asking the questions that need to be asked of both sides. And it's not so it's the kind of confusing of the terminology, either deliberately or accidentally, that the BBC have found themselves into so much trouble. But the reason everybody gets so angry over the scandals is because it's paid for by the taxpayer. You take the taxpayer element out of it, that it's a media organisation and it sinks or swims by its own decision, because it is never held accountable. The ultimate accountability of being closed down, it's never going to change.
Isn't George, hasn't Pete hit the nail on the head? In reality, and I know that the BBC would hit the roof if they heard me say this, in reality, the bit that we haven't thought of is if you no longer make the licence fee mandatory, how that would improve the BBC. We've all talked about budget cuts, but actually being forced to respond to your audience, I actually think would be something that would benefit the BBC, because we all know that the big downside of it having this guaranteed income is it doesn't give a toss what people think of it.
Well, it would raise standards, right? I mean, straight away on day one. If you know you've got to pay your mortgage at the end of the month and you're not working, you'll go out and work to pay your mortgage. If BBC know that their paychecks aren't coming in through at the end of the month because the advertising revenue isn't coming through and the counts aren't looking good, they're going to have to do something about it. They're going to have to improve their offering and improve their service. Currently, it's lazy because they know no matter what they report and no matter what they do, no matter the content they push out, it's being paid for and compensated by idiots like us that carry on paying our licence fee to an organisation that is repeatedly, over decades now...
Before we go to the break, very quickly, Pete, look, I just want to be absolutely clear on one thing. I would never sit in this chair and encourage you to break the law.
No.
But it is a fact that, and we don't know the percentage of people who literally aren't watching live TV and the percentage of people who are just swinging the lead, but 2.4 million cancellations of the licence fee in the past, 10 years?
Something like that,
And the bit cancel your licence crashed 4 times this week, the website.
Yeah, well, it's going to happen. And this is the thing, is that people, again, there's people saying, oh, you've got to defend, you've got to support the BBC. Why? Why? It's an institution. It doesn't necessarily... Back in the day when it was founded, it was there. It did have that kind of to educate and all the rest of it. We now have hundreds of media stations. It's not 1930s anymore. And the BBC has to get out of that mentality that it has some kind of divine right to exist.
Obviously, this is being repeated in the morning, so I don't want to be too graphic. But why don't I say this euphemistically? Let me assure you, if you phoned up the boss of talkTV and you said that you were going to go downstairs to the green room and take over a dressing room and invite a group of 13-year-old girls in there, you would be dragged out by the hair.
Yep.
You and rightly so. You know, how is this behaviour deemed acceptable by the
because
BBC?
it's that divine right of existence.
No sensible person would think that was appropriate.
But then again, when you have a kind of culture of you can't do that, they're the talent, they've got the power, that kind of then of course your career is then held by people who are fundamentally bad people.
But I mean, Jimmy Savile, and I'm not going to be graphic, but Jimmy Savile with his caravan. If this caravan's rocking, don't come knocking. It's the car park of the BBC. What the? I'd just sling him out.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. Look, we're getting told off because we should go to a break now, but we're going to continue with the press preview with Andre Walker, Pete Barnes and George Madrick straight after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yes, this is the press preview. Asher Gould is on holiday. I'm here with Pete Barnes and George Madrick. I just wanted to look at the front page of the Daily Telegraph because this is an issue which has come up multiple times. So, Shana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, Home Secretary, has told judges to stop, to put country before the European Convention on Human Rights. This suggests something which we've had before with things like the EU and also with the European Convention on Human Rights. The suggestion that judges are deliberately overly interpreting the legislation in order to get their political views across. Mahmood's not a fool. And for her to say, actually, we should put country before European Convention on Human Rights, that suggests that she does not believe that all of these rulings are strictly necessary.
Yeah, I think there's something to that, definitely. But I would also maybe take your own advice. I mean, I'm not being funny, but the woman who is in charge of the legal framework and the government who can dismantle everything that the judges are following as telling judges not to follow something, I think this is just a bit of a cheap spin to say, look, she's really tough on the issue of migration, when in fact we all know that she isn't. And I find it preposterous that anybody believes that she's actually going to change anything. This woman was literally picked because of, she ticks a couple of boxes. It's not competence to why she's there. But
it's interesting. It's interesting, George. I always get the impression with her that people just say she's brilliant without... Yeah. No, I'm not saying she's not, but they don't seem to have any knowledge. By the way, let me tell you my view on the immigration system. From what I can see, and I'm not an expert, if you have any case whatsoever, you will be allowed to stay in the United Kingdom. The only people who get deported are people whose case is so empty that they've got nothing they can say at all.
Well, I don't know if you've seen today, but there's a story of prison guards, actually being deported rather than the people that they're guarding being deported. I mean, if that doesn't tell you everything that is wrong in the country, I don't know what does, because this is the point, is that all of this is actually really fixable. You just have competent, sensible policies rather than playing to pander politics. and you actually enforce a kind of systematic workflow. This is the thing. Again, there is no kind of
do you remember, George, when they went on strike and the service improved?
Oh, I love that.
That was superb. The army was checking passports. They were better than the border and immigration. Look, I don't know what it's like in Portsmouth, but the immigration system is a mess, isn't it?
In Portsmouth, we have more asylum seekers that have arrived here on boats than any other authority in Hampshire combined. Let's sink in. Not just the highest number combined. We have a real serious problem here in Portsmouth. We've got over 700 people here. We've got hotels, we've got houses of multiple occupancy, we've got family homes being taken over, and they're now looking just in Gosport at a potential facility over there to put them in. It's a real big issue.
I've got to say to you, I don't know Portsmouth that well, though I went to Portsmouth Dog Track once or twice, but I think Pete will agree. I think Pete will agree with me on this. What we saw in the northwest was dumping asylum seekers, drug addicts, and whatever in coastal towns destroyed the economies in those towns. Blackpool, Morecambe, places like that. It was just ruinous.
Yeah, they put the hotel directly opposite the main arcade of the tourist destination on the pier of Portsmouth. I mean, it's smack bang in the middle. We've got a lake called Canoe Lake, which is a massive family hotspot in the summer, and that is literally 50 metres from the hotel, and it's almost like a no-go area now at this point. It really has affected and changed the local culture around here and the local mentality.
Yeah, I'm going to say, to follow on, is if you look at the south coast, it's estimated that it's the migration impact is about £1.3 billion in tourism that it's going to cost the region in terms of restaurants and hotels and all the rest of it because of the migrant crisis. Just that, not including everything that Rachel Reeves is doing to the economy and all everything else we've got going on. Just that factor is absolutely astronomical. And I feel for George, who's trying to do the best for his region and represent the best he can, but yet again on a national level, something that is so fixable isn't being fixed because of the lack of political will.
George, I was absolutely. Is it possible to be shocked and not surprised at the same time? In the words of Jed Bartlett, here was the thing that amazed me. When the government said, we're going to put fewer asylum seekers in hotels, and what they meant by that was they were going to buy the hotels and turn them into hostels. Literally the same place, but now they're no longer hotels because they've bought them. Well, it's like when Keir Starmer said we're going to stop the small boats by flying people in instead. That's not, it's just ludicrous, isn't it, George?
In my opinion, there's only one suitable place, and that is a secure facility of some description. That is the only place that is appropriate, in my opinion, because, as I say, look, these people that come over, we don't know anything about them, and that's the key point here. We don't know anything about them. They're undocumented. Yes, there's going to be some good people amongst them, and yes, there's going to be some dangerous people amongst them. And until we can know factually which ones are the dangerous ones and which ones are the good people, we have to put them in a secure facility and not allow them out in our public.
I think the problem is more fundamental than that. I think that Britain has two immigration policies. I think we have the one that exists on paper, which we all voted for, that nobody takes any notice of at all. And we have another one, which is basically open borders, enforced by judges and the legal profession, because they just like open borders. And it strikes me that our immigration policy is to not have an immigration policy. It's just to completely ignore what's in the legislation.
Yeah, it is. It's completely right. I mean, in my opinion, they people on the left, stand up to racism, always say, well, they're not criminals. And the way I see it is that by entering the country without documents, they've broken the law. They're criminals. I'm sorry, but they're criminals. I mean, under our legal system, they're criminals. And I think the best deterrent is that we have a zero tolerance policy, and very soon, that would deter people from coming over. But
yeah, I think there's a fundamental point that you've always got to make. Why do people come on small boats? Well, the reason they come on small boats is because they can't get a visa to come to UK. Why can't they get a visa to come to UK? They're too poor, they're too badly educated, they've got criminal record. Whatever it is, the system says we do not want you. Now, you might disagree with that system, but the system says we do not want you, and they've come anyway. Yes. I mean, that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah, I think a lot of people really have to understand that even if we get rid of the legal framework, they're still going to come. They're still going to come because what the reality is, where they're coming from, they don't want to be. And I wouldn't want to be either. And I do think this is it's part of understanding the migrant crisis in a much bigger picture, because unless you keep them in the place place where they're coming from. They're always going to want to come to where it's nicer to live, and it doesn't have occasion to blow up all the time. Nobody wants to live in a war zone, so why should they? And I do think we have to kind of go back down the line and actually fix the problem at the beginning and deal with the problem right now. Too many people keep kind of focusing on the situation, dealing with everything that's affected here without realising that it's going to keep happening if you don't fix it at the source.
Yeah, I just take the view, George, that the solution to Syria's problem is not to move everybody from Syria to Birmingham. I just think that that's just a pretty obvious comment. And if you take the view, George, that it is a good idea to move people from Syria to the UK, what is the outcome for Syria? What is it that you're trying to do? Because if you fundamentally accept that you can't fix Syria, then why not move everybody out? Why only move out a percentage? It doesn't, when you start to think about it, it doesn't make any real sense.
There was this wonderful video, I don't know if you two guys have seen it before, of an analogy of a man that gave the migrant analogy, but with marbles in different filters. It's an old video, and if you've not seen it, you've got to. It's the best video of an analogy you've seen. And he talks about how, if you move a certain portion out of a population into another population, you're going to change that new population dramatically. Yes. But the fundamental problem still exists, and you're moving one problem from one area to another, actually expanding the problem over a larger region, over many to another. That is a fundamental issue.
I think there is another which is, I think, really significant. And the point I would make is this. If you come from a backward country, you will be taught to be more progressive by coming to Britain, but you will drag Britain backwards. I remember when I spoke to a Latvian judge about the European Convention on Human Rights, and he said, the great thing is that countries like Latvia, because Britain was in the European Convention, that improved their legal system and it persuaded people to have a proper legal basis. And isn't it great that we have benefited from that? And the point I made to the Latvian judge was this: I accept that point. However, that the cost of that has been a diminution in the quality of the legal framework in Britain.
I wouldn't say it's an either or though. You can improve, but you've got to defend your own standards. That's the bit we didn't do. So we went into these organisations with the best of intentions to raise everybody up, but we didn't actually kind of fortify our own beliefs. We allowed people within them to kind of demigrate. We've been brought down from within.
But also the European Convention on Human Rights. We're going to go to a break now, but we're going to come back in a couple of minutes. The European Convention on Human Rights was intended to protect the public against an overbearing government. It has been flipped on its head. It is now the tool of an overbearing government in order to bully ordinary people. It has directly about-faced on what it was intended to do. We'll be back with the paper review just in a couple of moments.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yes, this is the press preview with Andre Walker, Pete Barnes and George Madrick. We are looking at the front page of the papers, but I've just noticed that Germany has voted against conscription. That is to say that they were considering making military service mandatory. I have to say, George, I think that conscription is a terrible idea, and I'll explain why. I fully understand this idea of trying to teach kids not to be feral, but, you know, in a modern, sophisticated military, you know, this is just... It's just not what the military should be doing. If you want to teach kids how to be well-behaved and respectful and all of those things, that's fine, but it's not the place of the military to do that.
I think this children's is a really good thing. We boxing clubs or local communities, but I'm on the fence a little bit. I don't think conscription should be mandatory for all citizens, but I think that conscription for young offenders would be quite a good learning curve, potentially. I'm not saying definitely, but potentially it's something that we could look at. I think the youth offender system in the UK is really weak. I think there's not enough punishment for young people.
The problem you
really weak.
And I'm going to say this as politely as possible, because of the reputation of military people, i.e. they're more aggressive than average, one would assume, they really do not like having criminals in their ranks because they feel it really undermines their reputation. And it's always been the military that's... And they've not just resisted putting criminals in because they've committed particularly serious crimes. It is a reputational thing as much as anything else.
Yeah, exactly. You could be right. And I'm not... I'd say it was just an idea off the top of the head, really, but I think that there could be a certain arm or a wing that is kind of created for that kind of thing. I think, look, putting them in prisons or youth rehabilitation centres, the current process, in my opinion, is not working. Whatever we're doing is not working. The youth that go into to these facilities come out and recommit at a higher level.
Of course there is, George. Of course there is a middle ground, isn't there, where you can say people with no previous criminal record, rather than being convicted, have an option to go into the military. That would mean they were not criminals by definition.
One thing I would love to do is if we were doing something with criminals while they're in prison. You know, the big problem is we have no probation services. We gutted them in under the was it 2011 and between 2011 and 2014. We absolutely savaged them, and we're now living in the consequences of that because yet again we didn't think longer than the end of our noses. We needed the money. We cut prison services. We kept prisoners and criminals in the cycle of crime, and then we get really angry that they're still in it. It's lunacy to keep thinking this.
I'll tell you what is the maddest bit of all of this. I thought David Cameron had a really good idea that he never really went forward with, which is sell all the city centre and town centre prisons for housing and use the money to build purpose-built out-of-town places where people can be properly, educated and whatever. And he felt that would be cost neutral. Can I tell you, Wandsworth Prison, I've got a friend of mine who lives opposite Wandsworth Prison in a £10 million house. Wandsworth Prison alone is worth billions.
Yeah, and it's falling down.
We continue to keep it.
Yeah, but the fundamental reality is nobody wants to live where there's a prison. So this is the thing. Everyone's running around saying, build more prisons. OK, I'll put one in your neighbourhood. Everybody will say no. That is the problem. No, they didn't build any prisons in the 14 years of the tourist because you didn't want one in your area. In the same way you don't want a housing estate in years of the infrastructure because of the disruption and the danger you think it poses. So again, a lot of these problems that the Tories didn't fix or anything is precisely because the people who are so outraged by things not being fixed would have opposed the fix.
Yes.
So the hypocrisy is very stark.
Although there is one thing which but going back to local government, one thing that has always struck me in planning. There is no such thing as bribery. So let me explain what I mean by that so people are not accidentally causing problems. If I go to my next door neighbour now and say, I want to build an extension on my house, if you write a letter to the council supporting that and it goes through, I will give you £1,000 in cash. That is entirely legal. It's always struck me that one thing that we never do is go to an ordinary community and say, look, we're going to build this whopping great prison here, but we're also going to give each and every person who lives around here 10 grand in cash. to thank them for it. And I think that's an idea that potentially could fly.
Yeah, I know what they do in America is when they do kind of build like these kind of like massive structures, the company or whoever it is that they're building for does invest in the community as well. So they do it all at once. So they don't just piecemeal it and make it like what should be a construction of 2 years, that's 10 years. They get it everything done and they move as quickly as they can.
But this is why people in your area oppose shale gas, because the money that was going to be given, David Cameron agreed to give it to Wigan Council, not the people of Wigan.
Yeah.
And of course, had it been actually, because of course, as you know, with shale gas, there's no staff there. So if you're going to have community payback, it needs to go to the individuals. Nobody was in favour of shale gas the minute they said it was going to Wigan Council.
Well, 100%.
Anyway, look, we are coming to the end of the press preview. If you're listening on Friday morning, Mark Dolan is up next. If you want to give him a call, 0344 499 1000. How have I forgotten the number? I've said it about 50 times. Thank you so much to Pete Barnes. Thank you so much to George Madrig, who was asked to come on for 10 minutes about 2 hours ago. And
welcome to my world, George.
And there's been an absolute trooper. So thank you so much. And Mark Dolan is up, so please do stick with him for the breakfast show. He's coming up right about now. And if you're still listening on Thursday night, Asha hasn't interrupted.
Oh, yeah.
But I always get the timing right and then goes, and then goes, well, now they have to edit it.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So what I always do, George, at this point is ask Pete what his final thought is about what's going on politically. Because, George, you've been so kind to stay on. You've got 30 seconds. What do you think people need to know?
I think people need to know, let's go back to local government and boring. I think people need to know, actually, no, let's twist it. On today, the Labour announced that obviously police and crime commissioners were going to be scrapped and to save loads of money. But let me tell you this, people need to know that that's actually a bad thing in my opinion, because now the mayors can announce a deputy mayor for police and crime. That deputy mayor for police and crime is now no longer responsible to the electorate, but only responsible to
OK, thank you so much. That is the end. Thank you so much to Pete Barnes. Thank you to George Madrig. I'll be back with you.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yes, this is Talk. Asha Gould is away. I just wanted to, just chill out, do it cash, just relax. You know what I mean? My dad was visiting me all this week, and as I said earlier on, I don't drink as much as I used to, so I had a cocktail machine that had no spirits in it, and my dad said, "I'll tell you what we should do. Let's load that up with spirits." That was what he said on Sunday, and let me tell you, by Thursday, I'm a broken man. Anyway, please do give me a call, 0344 499 1000. You can talk about absolutely... No, I'm not saying that. You can talk about almost anything, right? And the rule will be that if I find you boring, I'll cut you off. No, I'm joking. Please do give us a call. There's three or four slots available to get through, but let's go straight to Ken in London. Ken, you are on Talk.
Good morning, Andre.
Hello.
If you don't mind, Andre, I would like to tell you briefly about a great regret I've had in my life.
Okay.
Life can be very difficult at times, and I've got a regret which I've repented of many times, and that regret is that in my life, I never ever once told my dad that I loved him. Mm-hmm. And the fifth commandment is to honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that your God is going to give you.
Can I ask you, Ken? Most people haven't done that because their dad's not that sort of bloke. Was that the case with you?
Yes, the fully Scottish stiff upper lip. We don't like to express our feelings, sadly. But I had a brother and three sisters. We had a wonderful family, and I had a wonderful mum and dad. My mum, she looked after us. She provided everything for us: food, clothes, shoes. She loved us. I never forget, she used to go about doing the housework singing. She was a very happy-natured woman. And I loved her, but I only told my mum once I loved her, just before she died.
Yes.
Quite a few years ago, she died in the hospital up in Scotland. And I told her then, "Mum, I love you." And that's the only time, and I regret it. So I'm telling you this, if there's anybody listening to me tonight, listen to us, if you haven't yet told your mum and dad that you love them, then you need to think about it, because otherwise you'll regret it when they die.
I've got to be honest with you. Thank God, before my mum died, I thanked her for saving my life. Understatement of the year, I said, "Thank you for saving my life when I was a baby. That was awfully good of you," which I think she appreciated. And I think the understated element of it was also good as well. But are your brothers and sisters still with us, Ken?
No, my three sisters are dead, and my brother, he's 82. He's not keeping too good at the moment, sadly.
Right.
But my dad, I thought of him. I used to love my dad. He was my hero. I used to love being with him. He was a very hard worker. He was a tool maker. But he worked overtime. He provided for us. He loved my mum. He expressed it openly. He loved our mum. With a wonderful mum and dad. I wasn't perfect, but they had a wonderful.
Were they religious? Presumably, they were kind of Scottish Christian. Do you know what I mean? Go to church on a Sunday rather than being evangelical.
No, my mother was a very good Catholic.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. She was a very good Catholic woman. She prayed strongly. She prayed for us regular. My dad wasn't. He was a typical Scottish unbeliever, and. But it's something that's come over my heart a number of times in my life, and I've had to ask God to forgive me for not expressing my love openly.
Well, I do want to say one thing to you, Ken. I mean, I suspect that you have been fairly similar for much of your life. I think it's pretty obvious that you value your family and you value your friends. So even though you didn't tell your dad you loved him, I suspect he probably knew.
Oh yeah, he knew. He knew, and my mum. I remember when I was dating my future wife, when I was older, about 17, 18, 19. I expressed my love to my mum. I used to buy her a small box of chocolates when they come in at the weekend, and gave her a little box of chocolates. But I never said to her, "Mum, I love you." I should have said that. But anyway, that's just, I regretted that. So if there's anybody listening here and your mum and dad is alive, God wants you to express, the Bible actually says, honour your father and mother. Now, to honour your father and mother means, and it also gives us a stable life. We have to show our commitment for them when they grow old. We have to help them. with the respect.
I mean, I've got to say, Ken, and this is going to be. I don't want to say this in order to be nasty to people or to denigrate people, but I will say I think I was incredibly lucky to come from a very stable background where my mum and dad were married until death did them part, and I think I've not got any half brothers or sisters and all those sorts of things. I think those things are incredibly helpful as a young child. Now, that is not for me to. That's not me having a go at people, because obviously, if your family isn't like that, that's not your fault. But I do think having a man and a woman married for their entire life as your parents, I think is the best thing you can do.
It's wonderful, but that's all ordained by God, Andre. That's what God wants to bless us. That's what we need to do in this country. We all need to repent. We're all sinners. There's nobody without sin. We need to get back to the truth of the Bible and talk to Jesus and read the Bible. If we did that and we humbled ourselves, said, Lord, help me in my life. Help me believe in Jesus. If we cry out and ask God for help, God will help us. But we're too proud. That's the problem, Andre. We're too proud to say we need help from God. People are ashamed to even say they believe in Jesus in case somebody laughs at them.
Yeah.
God help us in this country. And we see what's happening.
It must be.
God is saying to this country, if you don't want Jesus, my son, you can have Allah, the false god of Islam, and Muhammad, the false prophet. That's what God's saying to us in this country. If you don't want me, you can have Allah and Muhammad, and that will destroy the country.
I mean, I've got to be honest with you. This is where you and I depart. I believe that each tribe should worship God in their own way, and therefore Islam for the Muslims and Christianity for the Christians. I appreciate that you and I don't agree on that point. What I don't want to do is see people see one religion taking over, and I'm comfortable in saying Britain should be a Christian country. That is not to denigrate anybody else, but I believe that that it is our birthright and it is our duty to maintain a Christian country.
Andre, that's quite a good philosophy, but it's wrong. The Bible tells us clearly, Andre, there is only one Lord God and one Saviour, and God has spoken to us through his Son Jesus. Jesus was very dogmatic. He said, unless a man is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. That is the words of God. Mm-hmm. We either believe him or we don't. We have to humble ourselves to honour our parents, but more importantly in our lives, we have to humble ourselves and honour the God of the Bible. Only the Bible is the genuine Word of God. That's the facts of life, Andre. We have to accept that and believe it. And until we do that, we'll be mixed up. We'll have a double heart.
Well, as you know my view, that if you do not stand up for your own culture, it would be replaced with somebody else's, and that's not those people being nasty. I believe that we should educate people in Christianity in schools, and for those people who aren't Christian, unfortunately, they'll just have to go along with it because it's a Christian country. Anyway, thank you so much, Ken. Sean in Liverpool said that he recently lost his mum. He lost her in February this year. She was 62, and he said that he was glad that he mentioned that he loved her. But he wished he'd said it more. OK, thank you, Ken. Let's go on to Heather in Gavan. Heather, you're on talk.
BBC and this...
I'm sorry, I didn't get any of that at all. Is this a dodgy line or something? Hello?
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 Can you hear me?
It's becoming tiresome now. All right, Heather, tell us what you want to say.
About BBC.
Heather, what we're going to do is we're going to refer you back to the gallery and sort out whatever tech problem has happened. Grace in London. Grace, you're on talk.
Hi, I was just wondering about why it is that you feel that people who are Muslims necessarily need to stay Muslim. I'm not in any way saying that they should be obliged not to remain Muslim. I really think that each person must have the choice to believe what they choose to believe.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are going to be people who roll in there. There are going to be people who get extremely angry about this. But my fundamental view, which you might not like, is that essentially Christianity, Islam, Judaism are basically the same religion. In most of their central pillars, they're essentially very similar. And my own view is even though I believe that Islam is wrong, I don't believe it's wrong enough to care. So essentially what I believe is that it's all one religion and these minor disagreements are not worth arguing about. Now, what I would then say to you, now I realise what I'm saying to you is heresy in your view, but my honest view is to say, well, look, Christianity is the way we worship God in this country. In Pakistan, they want to do it differently, and I'm good with that.
No, what I think is whether or not, what matters is whether or not it's true that Jesus rose from the dead. Mm. And if he did, then we can take seriously what he said about his having defeated death and offering us eternal life. And I can't get my head around that at all. But when I read enough about the history of the accounts of his resurrection, I came to conclude that it actually did happen, as mad as it sounds. Now, if that's true, then that really matters. If it's not true, then as Paul writes in the New Testament, then we're all just silly.
Well, yes. I mean, look. Let's look at the Jesus disagreement between Christians and Muslims. Muslims believe that Jesus is an important prophet, and Christians believe that he's literally God made human. In many respects, and I don't want to wind people up. In many respects, in terms of his teachings, whether each one of those is true doesn't actually make that much of a difference to his essential fundamental message. Therefore, my argument would be, just because I believe Muslims are wrong, I don't care that they're wrong. Do you see what I mean?
I see what you mean, but I think the thing is that he said that he is the way to the Father, and it's not just a matter of what he taught. You're right that some of his teachings are similar to some of the teachings in some other religions, but he didn't just teach us about being good. He also said that he is the way that we can have.
Yes, but here is the slight health warning. Here is the slight health warning, Grace. I appreciate that you and Ken are different, and there will be people watching and listening to this who are different. But the vast majority of people take the religion of their parents, and therefore the reason that people believe in Islam is not some. And I'm not trying to be rude to people. It's not some grounded, long thought through thing. That's the religion they inherited from their parents. Ergo, I'm not very keen to condemn people for inheriting a religion that I believe is wrong.
No, I'm certainly not saying we should condemn anyone. What I'm saying is that I'm interested in trying to best understand what's true. As you said, many people do simply inherit their parents' beliefs. In this country, I think a lot of people inherit their parents' beliefs of atheism or agnosticism and don't give it much more thought. But I think what matters is trying to discern what's true. And in contrast to Islam and other religions, in which one kind of earns your way to heaven, you do good things, or if you're a particular kind of person, you might do bad things and think that that's how you, if you fly planes.
Yeah, but remember one thing. I can be polite and nice all day, but fundamentally, as a Christian, I believe that Hinduism, Sikhism, Islam, Judaism are wrong. I don't believe they're evil, but I believe they're wrong in the same way as a Muslim would believe that Christianity was wrong. And so, I don't seek to defend these religions. I'm just saying that I don't have a fundamental problem with this idea of you being slightly wrong because your parents gave you a religion and you inherited it.
I absolutely am not trying to condemn or criticise anyone.
No, I understand that.
I mentally believe that each person must decide for themselves what they're going to believe. What I'm saying is that whereas some religions teach that you earn your way to paradise or reincarnation, Jesus said, by contrast, that none of us can earn it. We can just decide to follow him and have him take the punishment that we deserve for our sin. And so that is a fairly significant difference.
Yes.
And it's based on an actual event. And you can decide whether or not you believe in that event, i.e. the resurrection, or not. But each person can make that choice for themselves. And it is quite a significant distinction.
Yeah, and I do get that. And look, what I'm trying to... I guess what I'm trying to say is this. Maybe it's because I'm a Catholic, but I'm not particularly interested in converting people. I'm not particularly interested in being a evangelist. I'm not particularly interested in going out and trying to get people to come into my religion. That's just me, right? And therefore I don't spend a great deal of time worrying about the fact that other people are wrong.
Yeah, Well, I don't think that worrying about other people being wrong is necessarily helpful. That's fair enough. And I sometimes think that some people spend too long worrying about other people's issues and not.
But can I ask you a fundamental question, Grace? Can I ask you a fundamental question? There's a guy in the gallery who is, I think he's part Irish and Jewish as well, and so he practices Judaism. Do you believe that at the pearly gates God's going to say, listen, you brought up your kids as a Jew, not as a Catholic, therefore you're going to hell? Or do you believe that God will say, well, look, all religions were slightly wrong in different respects, but you were a good person, therefore you can come in?
It is hard to say, but I think ultimately that what heaven is not just a nice place with fluffy clouds. It's to be in God's presence. And so I think we can decide whether we want to enter God's presence and spend eternity in God's presence. And we do that by turning to Jesus and having him take the punishment we deserve. Or we say, no, I don't want to be in your presence, God. And then we have a second death, and that's destruction, the end. So I don't think of it as kind of in the way that some paintings might illustrate it. I think it's about choosing to spend eternity with God in the joy that he offers, and that's possible through Jesus, or we reject him.
Of course, it's also possible, and I've thought about this, and you can throw me, or you can say I'm wrong if you want, but it strikes me that that hell might be quite good fun, and I'll explain why. Because I think that the people that go to hell are so factious that they would be enjoying themselves by their own standards. Do you see what I mean?
I see what you mean.
Or alcohol and drugs and fornication and all this sort of thing. And because they're not good enough people to recognise that isn't the path to happiness, they're doing it anyway and having quite a nice time.
Yeah, but no, that's not what hell is. Hell is to be separated from God, and God gives joy in many different things that we enjoy in life. So if you're separated from the joy that he has made possible for human beings, you're not going to be having a party.
But do you believe? Do you believe that some people are raptured into heaven and other people are condemned to eternal fire?
I don't believe in eternal conscious suffering. I believe that people may experience a degree of punishment so that there is justice, because God is a God of justice, but then people cease to exist. Fire burns things up and then they don't exist anymore. I don't believe people just go on suffering forever and ever and ever and ever.
I mean, if Ken was sat here now, what he would say is that even if you're a murderer and you're on death row, if the moment before you die you say, OK, this is my punishment, and Ken is not against punishing people who've committed crime, but there you go, this is my punishment, now I'm going to repent and I recognise that I shouldn't have done this, you will go to heaven.
If a person genuinely were repentant, then yes. But I think that if a person has committed something as heinous as murder, it's not very likely that they're going to suddenly authentically change their minds, but they could do, and really amazing things do.
I think it's difficult. I think it's difficult with death row. So I think everybody regrets what they've done. The question is whether they regret it because they're about to be put to death, or whether they regret it because of some genuine sympathy for the victims. I think my own view on that, having watched some programmes, is that of the sane people on death row, and there are some people who are just psychopaths, of the sane people, many of them murdered somebody when they were quite young, maybe in the teens or early 20s. They've reflected on that over 40 years and are just, I know this sounds like a stupid thing to say, are just more capable of understanding what they've done wrong, and have more of an ability just through maturity to reflect on it in a way perhaps they couldn't do when they were younger. Also remember, what's his name? Is his name Jeremy Dean, the KC who comes on this show? As he said, the vast majority of people who've killed somebody, it's a debate between manslaughter and murder. They did it accidentally, or they went too far in a fight or whatever. There's very few people who literally sit there and go, I wish to kill this person, and then forevermore don't regret it.
Yeah, and I think that the human brain and the capacity for good and evil is really complicated. I think that we shouldn't presume that there is... Some people want to presume there is no such thing as evil, and that anyone who commits a crime is just a victim of circumstance, and I don't think that's true. I think that people can be legitimately evil.
But let's just bear in mind one thing, and this is where I do feel sorry for some people in the public eye. If on this TV show now, Grace, I was able to tell everybody everything you've ever done. There would be bits of it you wouldn't be proud of. And I think one thing that worries me, obviously, you've got to remember one thing, just to be clear. I'm not actually sat in your lounge. I'm sat in a studio in London Bridge. But, so our relationship is not real. But there is a great tendency nowadays to feel that people are a personal narrative. You know, there's lots of different things about me, not just what I do at the moment. And I think you've got to remember that good people can do bad things. It just is the nature of the beast.
Yeah, I think that one of the issues that all of us can have to some extent is that in part, as Ken said, we're proud, and in wanting to avoid recognising our own sin or flaws, whatever word you might want to use, we defer that by looking at what other people have done wrong and focusing on that, because we don't want to face up to the fact that we ourselves have done things wrong, even if it's to a different magnitude.
Yeah, well, can I tell you something? Oskar Schindler continued to say that his best friend was Untersturmführer Amon Goeth, who you will remember from the film Schindler's List. For, you know, he was a horrendous murderer who was executed after the Second World War. Rudolf Höss, the camp commandant at Auschwitz, his children say he was a good father. And I know that's a very extreme example, but I don't believe it is true to say that you should expect him to be a bad father just because he's an evil Nazi, because the two don't necessarily conflict.
No, absolutely. And, well, I think some people...
I mean, that's a very extreme example, I will say.
Well, some people might argue that that's about wanting to continue one's genes and the instinct that one has towards one's offspring as opposed to other people. I think that it's fundamentally important that we can care about human beings even if we're not related to them.
Well, in the book, I will say one thing, and we don't want to get into Nazis and the Holocaust, but in the book Ordinary Men, about an auxiliary police unit which participated in the Holocaust, the prevailing view is that the members of the policing team hated the job of genocide but believed it had to be done, and therefore did it in order to keep up their end, if you like, for their duty to the Reich. I mean, it's a crazy thought, but when you put it like that, I think it's perfectly possible to believe that these people, in addition to being genocidal maniacs, were also quite nice guys down the pub.
I haven't met any of them, but I presume that some of them were brainwashed to some degree, but also that human evil does exist.
Yeah.
But as I was saying, I think sometimes we need to, we can condemn the Nazis, and it's important to learn about that history, but also we do spend a lot of time feeling angry with the evil carried out by other people, and nowadays, as you said, focusing on the evil or the wrongs of celebrities or politicians. Sometimes we maybe need to spend a bit more time reflecting on our own
Grace, we are massive.
I certainly do, and recognising that we're all flawed, albeit to different extents. But as Ken said, we need to get over our pride, and I believe that Jesus offers us forgiveness even though we don't deserve it.
OK, Grace, we're massively over on the break. Do you know what? I do think I should make the following point. Obviously, a couple of moments ago, I gave quite an extreme example of people who participated in the Holocaust. I just want to be absolutely crystal clear. Just because they may or may not have been nice to their kids or may not have been fun down the pub should not, under any circumstances, be given as a mitigation for the crimes they committed, which remain absolutely horrendous. The point I was making was that you know, good people do bad things and bad people can do good things on occasions, and I think none of us are as black and white perhaps as you think, although obviously the camp commandant at Auschwitz, the fact that he was nice to his kids should offer nothing whatsoever in terms of mitigation for his crimes. I'll be back in a moment.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Do you know what? I'm just reminiscing. When I first started doing this job, I remember something went completely badly wrong. I forget what it was. My microphone got pulled out, my earpiece came. It was all just a bit of a nightmare. And I went, right, go to commercial. And the producer in the gallery went, you can't do that in real life. Oh, damn. So now I've just proved I have absolutely no power whatsoever. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Heather in Gavan, I think we've now got a better line for you. So you're now on Talk. Hello.
Hello, Andre. Can you hear me now?
I can. I could hear you before, but it didn't sound a bit like that.
I was watching a documentary on one of the network channels about national disgrace, national treasure, about the Jimmy Savile and Stuart Hall and Russell, Rolf Harris and Gary Glitter. I say the BBC made monumental mistakes in getting these kind of characters on the BBC. It doesn't do any justice whatsoever by having these kind of people on a national TV. Well, it doesn't matter if it's a public service or a subscribing channel or whatever. They shouldn't have done it in the first place, and these victims wouldn't have happened.
But you know, I made this point before, Heather, and you know, I don't understand what the BBC were thinking. Let me assure you, if a presenter on this channel said, "Hey, you know, after my show, I fancy getting some drinks in the dressing room and inviting some young girls round," the company they'd just throw you out. How the BBC thought? I mean, it's a dressing room. You're there to put your clothes on, not, you know, organise some sort of harem of kids. It's just I just don't you know, the reason I make that point, Heather, the reason I make that point, Heather, is because I wouldn't like you to think that that's normal in the media world. It is just completely bizarre.
I know it's completely bizarre. It's like the BBC grooming gang. What on earth are they doing? They're supposed to be protecting children and protecting young women and teenagers from harm, from abuse, from sexual assault, from these celebrities. What on earth are them doing, allowing these pervertive pleasures of these celebrities? Who the hell are they to jump the moral high ground to do that to innocent little kids when they're supposed to be icons to the fans? They're not supposed to cause harm to their fans.
But equally, I mean, you may well want to put me on a pedestal because I'm on the TV and I'm on the radio, but fundamentally, it doesn't make me any different to you. I'm just some guy who has this job, right? So the assumption that I'm going to be somehow morally better than you or more worthy of trust or whatever, I don't buy. I mean, the reason I do this job is not because I'm a better person than you. It's just because it happens to be my skill sets, right? You know, I wouldn't necessarily say that you have to trust me implicitly just because I happen to have this job over trusting implicitly somebody who's a baker or candlestick maker.
Trust has got to be validated at all cost, whether you're a radio DJ or in the public eye on TV. You've got to have respect of your fans, and you've got to understand that respect, because if you betray that trust in your fans, you're not worth it.
Yeah, I've got to be honest with you. It's incredibly easy for me because when you do come up and say hello, normally what happens is people go, oh, "I'm really sorry, I don't mean to bother you." Which I know that sounds silly, but that's a great thing because you know the person's not going to sit there for 5 hours. But if people just come up and say hello to me and we have a bit of a chat, and it's normally I'm normally a bit more politically incorrect than I am on the show. But I think it's important. I'll tell you what I do think is important. It's important that we have the bond of trust, which is that you've got to be able to believe that I'm telling the truth here. I think that is absolutely vitally important. Anyway, Heather, thank you so much. I've completely mucked up all of the adverts, so we're going to go to another advert and then we're going to come back and talk to Carol in Manchester. Back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yes, this is Talk. Just to explain to you, Asher Gould is on holiday. I think he's only gone for a week, so I'm sure he's watching, actually. So hello, Asher. Have a good time in Eastbourne. I think it's all a bit strange that you go on holiday on your own to a flat, but, each to his own. Anyway, let's go to Carol in Manchester. Carol, you're on Talk.
Oh, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Fantastic. I'm just going to give you 10 seconds because we heard about 25 seconds regarding with religion. Totally agree with you. This is a Christian country. At the end of the day, it's like every country has their own religion. And no disrespect. I have no disrespect on anybody else's religion. But when it comes to encroaching in the country that we are, please respect us. That's all I've got to say. But the other thing that I was going on to was, again, with the television licence with it.
Yeah.
And I think we've gone round the world with everything, with what's going on with the BBC, who it's offending. It's been offending for years. It's been going on and going on and going on. What it's offending is what I know with lots and lots of people. As you know, I talk to lots of people. And what's offending is that we're going to be paying £180 for something we don't want. We just do not want it. Now, man, there might be people that want it, and that's fair enough, but please pay for it. I don't want it. A lot of other people don't want it. And the other thing is, stations like yourself and other news stations that have come up, you are more strictly abiding with lots and lots of stuff and goes on. And the BBC, like I heard when you were speaking to others and whatever, is that they are getting away with murder. And the reason why they're getting a murder is because they've got their own laws.
But isn't that their own laws? Can I defend the BBC for a moment, which won't be particularly popular? But you've got to remember, the BBC tries to be all things to all men. The reason that you are watching and listening to this is because we approach things from a centre-right position. That's not to say that we're biased. We will explain things in a fair-minded way, but you know where we're coming from, and you know the subjects that are of interest to us. As an example, we're more likely to talk about immigration than we are about the NHS, as an example. And perhaps at LBC that might be the other way round. But it is quite difficult for the BBC because they're trying to do absolutely everything and therefore kind of achieve nothing. Do you see what I mean?
Do you know, honestly, I absolutely agree with most things that you say, but I disagree on this point of view with it. Is because I've been watching it over the last 10 years, and I've come out of it more and more and more because I do not see what and it's so hard. You know, like, it's how many people do they employ? It's so hard to have a non-biased kind of programme.
Well, I'll tell you what I said. I'll tell you what I said when I went to study journalism at the University of London. They said to me, they said, who do you think is the best Conservative commentator? I said Jeremy Clarkson. He's not even a Politico. I said to them, my ambition is to work for The Sun, which I've not done, but I do work for News UK. Very proud to. What I said to them was, I said all news is biased. Right, so what you've got to remember is, front page of the Daily Mirror has a picture of Pat from EastEnders. It doesn't have the news of what's in the soap operas in Uganda. Now, you might say, well, that's pretty obvious because nobody cares. But every editorial decision you make, it reflects a bias. In this case, you're more interested in EastEnders than you are what's on the TV in Uganda. And given that you can't report absolutely everything, then there has to be bias to it. It's just impossible otherwise.
But I do think that over the last few years, it's getting worse and worse. It doesn't matter who you like or who you don't like. I mean, but I really do think regarding, and I know it's very hard to take politics out of a lot of stuff and everything and that, but it's in your face. It's literally in your face. It doesn't matter. I mean, I know they've been going on about Trump. You know, like, I mean, it don't matter if you like him, you hate him, you might, what you call it doesn't matter with it. But some of the stuff that's coming out, you know, like, and it's not just with Trump. It's to do with Gaza, it's to do with everything. It's to do with lots of stuff. And it's like, it really does. I mean, because I'm very, as you know, I am very political, but I don't throw it in anybody's face. I would like to have a debate, and I respect, and sometimes, well, quite often, I'll change my mind within that debate or whatever. But it's very, very hard. I'm finding it with the BBC that it's very, very hard because some of the stuff that's coming out with, people do not have a chance to debate. It's like me and you now, we're debating or talking. And unfortunate, within the news channels now, and it's not just the BBC, I see on Channel 4, it's absolutely shocking over the years, you know, like that they're having these, you cannot get back and say, right, I don't like that, or I think that's wrong, or what you call it, and it's very irritating when it's in your ears every single
I'll tell you what I find extremely frustrating. The rank hypocrisy. So first of all, we're not bothered about the fact that Xi Jinping has 2.5 million Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps. But somebody pointed out to me the other day, right, think about this. Everybody is complaining about Israel, oppressing people and settlers and all this sort of thing. And, this is terrible that this country is occupying Palestinian land. 145 miles from Israel, we are in the 51st year of an Islamic country, Turkey, occupation of northern Cyprus. They invaded in 1974. Around half of Cyprus continues to be occupied by a foreign Islamic government. 145 miles from Israel, and nobody cares.
My friend's just going there tonight, and we've had that discussion about it. She's there because her husband, or what you call it, with her, but he works within the government, and he's there anyway. He's, like it's not what you call it. It's just it's finger. He goes over it several times, and a really nice little community where she is. That she goes every so often, and I've just been educated with that over the last 12 months, and this is why I don't understand why we're getting the same stuff day in and day out or whatever. Something like that you just spoke to me about, is that why are we not having that on the television? Why are we not having it on the BBC? Just to sort of say, even in Africa, there's so much going on in Africa, doesn't move, doesn't go or whatever. That's probably why we're having so many people that are trying to move or go wherever they go. I'm not going to go to the to immigrants and stuff like that. I find it very traumatic anyway with what's going on within Europe, all the way, these men coming all the way through or whatever. I find that another story. But I do find that we're not being educated properly by the BBC.
Well, I think the reality is, if you say what is unique about Israel, I have to say there is very little unique about Israel. When people present this as the most important issue in the world, as far as I'm concerned, Israel's settlements of the West Bank are precisely the same issue as Turkey's settlement of Famagusta in Cyprus. There's no difference between any of this. It's land that was the West Bank is land that was obtained by invasion in exactly the same way as Northern Cyprus was obtained by invasion. And some people will watch this and they will say, why is it that we care about Israel and we don't care about Cyprus? And the answer is because people have a tendency to put Islam on a unique pedestal, which is to say that if an Islamic country invades, that's fine, but if somebody invades an Islamic country, it's not fine. Now, I don't know if that's the actual reason why we're so worried.
I agree with you, and I agree with you. At the end of the day, it's the way that our governments in the world as well. It's not just here. It's in Europe. It's in America. It's in Australia. It's in Canada. It's in every. They've all literally. It's like I don't know. I know it sounds really awful that I'm saying this now, but it's like a cult. It's just we're not being fair. We're not being. I think
the other thing that upsets me. So, look, I've criticised Israel and the IDF on plenty of occasions. I have no problem doing that, and I think that sometimes they go too far. Many times they go too far. But one of the things that I find incredibly frustrating about the Israel situation is that the largest problem here is that Gaza is run by terrorists. That is the biggest issue. And the reality is nobody cares about the issue of trying to get Gaza a sensible government. They're just bothered about Jews invading or doing whatever. Anyway, that is the break. I'm going to be back with Cindy in Michigan straight after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, this is Talk, and we're in the final stretch now. Who's coming on after this? Is it Paul Ross? It doesn't matter. Okay, let's go to Cindy in Michigan. Cindy, how are you?
Oh, great, Andre. Good to talk to you.
You too.
And you know, if I haven't told you lately, you are utterly fantastic.
Thank you so much. That's so nice of you.
Truly. Yeah, I wanted to talk about the BBC, and they finally issued their apology to Trump, right? But I still hope that he sues the pants off of them.
Somebody told me that it's quite hard to sue somebody for defamation in the United States of America, but if you win, punitive damages can mean that £1 billion would just be.
True. Well, it's up to the jury and the judge. So it wouldn't be out of the ordinary for him to get that, but I think it's going to be in the millions. I don't think it's if he does win, it'll be in the millions.
The problem is with the United Kingdom. I don't know if you know, but in the United Kingdom, you have to demonstrate your material loss. So, as an example, if you let's give the example of Bill Roache, the actor who plays Ken Barlow in Coronation Street. So he's a soap star in the UK. Basically, he sued a newspaper for saying he was boring, and he did win. But they said you can't demonstrate any financial loss, therefore we're awarding you damages of zero, and we're not awarding you your legal costs, which was £600,000, which virtually bankrupts him. And what they said was, we accept that you are not boring, and in that sense you've been defamed. But the fact that it's caused you no financial loss means there's no compensation to award you.
Oh, that's awful.
That's the way it would work in Britain.
Boo.
So Donald Trump. So what
in Florida?
So what would happen with Donald Trump? Imagine he didn't win the presidential election as a result of what the BBC had said. He could sue the BBC for 5 years of his £200,000 salary, but that would be it.
Ugh. Yeah, he's gonna. I know he's gonna have better luck in Florida. That's definitely. Yeah, odds are in his favor.
How upset or otherwise are you about this? Because it seems to me, I think that there was a remarkable level of stupidity when it came to the Biden election. First of all, it is wholly legitimate for people to question the electoral process. It's wholly legitimate for them to bring examples of electoral fraud, and it's wholly legitimate for examples of electoral fraud to be debated when the matter comes before the Senate. The fact that any of these things happened, I don't understand why people lost their shiz over it.
Well, you know what? Even if it were a simple person, I would understand. Like a non-famous person, even if they were upset, I would totally understand it, because this is a news organization that should know better.
Yeah.
I mean, any journalist worth a grain of salt would know better. This was such an easy thing not to have done.
I've watched various commentators, and Owen Jones, as an example, said something like, "We all know it's an unarguable fact that Donald Trump attempted a coup d'etat and organised an insurrection in the Capitol." Now, my line is this: it is simply not beyond any debate or any doubt that he did that. In fact, I personally don't think he did it at all. But this idea, he definitely did it. It is a definite fact. I just don't think the facts bear that out at all.
I agree with you, but there's a lot of people out there that would watch that tape and think that it was totally true.
I mean, the other thing is, Cindy.
Even at this time, there's a lot of people that don't know any better.
But the other thing is, Cindy, I mean, there have been plenty of occasions where a mob has got out of hand. Right? I mean, you don't, when you invite people to an England football match and some of them riot on the pitch, you don't say to the England football manager, you caused an insurrection because you encouraged people to watch the match. It's just garbage, isn't it?
It is total garbage. But, you know, there are people that, let's say they want to believe what they want to believe because they just don't like him.
What happens next? Will J.D. Vance run for president?
I believe so, and I hope so, because if he does, he's got my vote.
Okay.
Oh, I love him. I've watched an interview with him on Joe Rogan. He's so good. He's so intelligent. I love his views. He's great.
I think he's been a better partner than Mike Pence, hasn't he?
Oh, most definitely, yeah. Most definitely. And he's more he's just so well spoken, highly intelligent. He's really got what it takes.
I also think that that whole thing about being disrespectful in the Oval Office with both Starmer and President Zelensky, obviously he threw Zelensky out. He had to go at Starmer for lying in the Oval Office. You know, I like the fact that we're starting to be much more honest.
I like it too. Oh, yeah, for sure. We need more honesty, and the BBC could learn a lot from honest places.
The big problem is, Cindy, I'm going to cut you off because we've got to go to another caller. But the problem with the BBC is they are just obsessed with Donald Trump being evil, and they just can't get through their heads that things that he does. They genuinely seem to believe that he's going to take over the country and abolish elections. Madness. Okay, Carl is in Portsmouth. Carl, you're on talk.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hi, yeah, I was just wondering, with your conversation earlier on with George Madwick, about you had local elections and national elections, and I just wondered how the announcements today that the local mayor would now get the powers of the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think George was very keen on that idea, simply because you're going to appoint a deputy mayor for crime and policing. I think I have to say to you, I think there's a lot of problems with British policing, and I think things have gone badly wrong. But instinctively, I don't think police and crime commissioners are making things worse. I think they're probably making things a bit better.
I would agree. It's just the power that this mayor is going to get. The local mayor now, how much power are they going to sit? So I vote for my council, I then vote for my MP, and now I'm going to vote for a mayor and
well, I'll tell you the thing that worries me. What they are, so they say that local councils are not accountable, and I get that. I think it's because local councils are too big. In 1974, when they merged all these towns together, what they were attempting to do was they're attempting to get economies of scale. But now local councils contract services in. I think you need to go back to hyper-local, where everybody knows the local council because he represents your street.
Well, then you've got LGR coming in as well.
Yeah. Well, the LGA is more of a trade organisation. I mean, I don't think it's that great, to be honest, the LGA. But I'll tell you my criticism.
No, I'm talking about with local government reform, where we're going to have like these national councils, almost with the mayor and now.
Yeah. So I'll give an example of where I live. The proposal where I live is to merge Bracknell, the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead, Slough, and something else, and create something like, what is it, East or West Berkshire, I can never remember which, council with a directly elected mayor. I think it would be horrible, but that is the plan.
Yeah, I think that the government are just not looking at who's got the power and who will be in charge of what.
Well, I personally don't think that these regional mayors have been particularly great, to be honest. I think Sadiq Khan's been awful. I think Andy Burnham's a bit better, but I could see Manchester surviving without Andy Burnham. I think the problem that we have with Sadiq Khan is the worse he performs, the more electable he becomes. The reason is because he blames the government for every fault, and he's got 75 press officers. So the irony is, the worse Sadiq Khan runs London, the more likely he is to be re-elected.
Yeah. It just seems crazy. I don't think they've got an idea of what it means.
Well, of course, the other slightly confusing thing is we now have two different types of mayors. We have the mayors who are the representatives and the mayors who are executive mayors. We're creating a real dog's dinner, if I'm being totally honest.
Yeah, and I just think we're creating costs where we can't afford them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, thank you so much. Well, do you know what? I think I've had quite a good time. That was Carl in Portsmouth. I just want to say one thing. Look, you know, we attempt to be scrupulously fair on this channel. I think it has been a bad week for media when you talk about the BBC, simply because no matter how much you hate Donald Trump, no matter what you think of him as a politician, we can all be critical because he is a bit aggressive and so on and so forth. You know, to fake things in that way. And what galls me is the way the BBC call us biased. We're not biased. We come from a particular point of view and we attempt to reflect what our audience are interested in, and we talk about the stories that those we think that those audience members are interested in. What we don't do is come on and lie when we disagree with a particular person. You know, we don't like Sadiq Khan, but we don't edit his clips in a way that that is unacceptable. What we try and do is we try and be fair, but we come at it from a certain point of view. OK, well, I'm going to be back at 10 o'clock tonight or tomorrow. It's always really bizarre leaving work on the same day that you come back. Thanks so much for everybody who's got in touch with the show. We miss Asher, don't we? Yeah, I think we do. Have a great time in Eastbourne. And I've got to be honest with you now, I'm chilling out, I'm relaxing, I've got a minute left, so do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to deliberately waste some time by going through the front pages.